Hello, my friend. Get comfortable because tonight we're travelling back to London in the year 1855 to a city of smoking chimneys, rattling carriage wheels, glowing gas lamps, and respectable houses whose polished front doors conceal an astonishing amount of work. Imagine yourself standing inside one of those houses before sunrise. The air is cool enough to make you pull your shawl closer, somewhere below. Coal shifts softly inside a grate. You smell yesterday's fire, beeswax, damp stone, and the faint lingering scent of cooked meat from the kitchen passages. Outside, London is only beginning to stir. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. It is always strangely comforting to imagine all of us scattered across different places, quietly wandering through the same vanished world. Now, dim the lights, and listen to the house breathe. You are its housekeeper. Your day begins before most of the family upstairs has considered opening an eye. It is not quite 5:30 in the morning when you wake in your own room, unlike the younger female servants, who may share bedrooms in cramped quarters. A housekeeper in a prosperous establishment can expect greater privacy. Your position demands dignity. Privacy helps maintain it. You sit upright beneath heavy blankets. For several seconds, there is silence. Then comes a muffled clatter somewhere below. Someone else is awake. Good. That means you may not have to begin your morning by discovering why the kitchen fire is cold. You dress carefully. Your clothes are practical but respectable, usually darker and more restrained than those worn by fashionable women upstairs. A clean collar matters. So does your cap. You're not dressing merely to work. You're dressing for authority. And authority, in a Victorian household, has a costume. At your waist hangs perhaps the most recognisable symbol of your position keys. They make a small metallic sound when you move. Those keys will become important later. For now, simply feel their weight. You open your door. The corridor beyond is dim. There is no convenient electric switch waiting for your sleepy hand. You carry a candle or small lamp, guarding the flame from drafts as you move. Shadows stretch across the walls. Floorboards answer your footsteps with little complaints. A modern person might find this house beautifully atmospheric for approximately 7 minutes. After that, you would probably want central heating. You descend toward the working parts of the building. In a wealthy London household, domestic service follows a hierarchy almost as carefully observed as the social order outside. The housekeeper stands among the senior servants in many establishments. She ranks alongside the cook and beneath the butler in the internal order. Although exact arrangements differ from household to household, your authority is especially strong over the female domestic staff. Housemaids answer to you. Laundry arrangements may pass through you. Linen certainly occupies your attention. Stores, cleaning, household supplies, bedrooms, furniture, and countless small domestic matters eventually find their way toward your door. This is one of the basic realities of Victorian domestic service that survives clearly in household manuals and servants' accounts. A housekeeper is not simply a woman who cleans a house in a substantial establishment. She is a manager, and management begins with inspection, downstairs. Warmth reaches you. A kitchen maid or scullery maid has already begun working near the fires. The younger servants often rise brutally early because fires must be cleaned, grates prepared, water carried, ranges heated, and rooms made ready before their employers awaken. You hear metal scraping against iron. Coal knocks against a bucket. Someone yawns and quickly tries to disguise it. You notice. You notice almost everything. That is part of your job. You pass through a service corridor and check that morning routines have begun properly. Perhaps a housemaid is carrying hot water upstairs. Another prepares brushes and cloths. Somewhere a servant kneels before a fireplace, removing ash left from the previous night. There is an odd little contradiction here. The grander the household appears, the more dirt its servants must battle. Coal produces soot, fires produce ash, boots carry mud, candles drip grease, oil lamps smell, streets deposit London itself upon coats, hems, carpets, and entrance halls. Respectability requires constant warfare against grime, and you are one of its commanding officers. A curious detail from Victorian domestic culture is the enormous importance attached to seemingly tiny signs of disorder. A badly polished surface, dusty moulding, crooked curtain, or carelessly arranged a room could be interpreted not merely as poor cleaning but as evidence that the household itself lacked discipline. Imagine having your moral character judged by a dusty table leg. Victorians were ambitious that way. You enter the housekeeper's room. This space is your headquarters. Depending upon the wealth and design of the house, it may be comfortably furnished compared with ordinary servants' quarters. There might be cupboards, a table, chairs, perhaps shelves containing china or household records. Senior servants may eat here separately from junior staff. You place your candle down. Before the day becomes noisy, you have a few precious minutes to think what requires attention, which rooms are being used. Is anyone expected to visit? Has linen been returned? Are supplies running low? Did one of the maids mention a broken brush yesterday? And what about that suspiciously rapid disappearance of sugar? You remember it. Of course you remember it. Your employer may barely know how much sugar remains downstairs. You know almost exactly. This ability to keep an enormous domestic inventory inside your head makes you valuable. There remains some disagreement among historians about how independently housekeepers actually operated. Prescriptive household manuals often describe wonderfully ordered systems, but surviving personal accounts suggest reality could be much messier. Some mistresses supervised domestic matters closely. Others delegated heavily to trusted senior servants. Your experience depends enormously upon the woman employing you. A competent mistress may treat you with reserved respect. An anxious one may inspect everything herself. A careless one may leave you effectively governing the domestic machinery. And an impossible one, well, Victorian employment manuals rarely include a chapter titled, "What to do when your employer is unbearable." Pity. You hear movement overhead. The house is changing. Doors open. A bell sounds somewhere in the building. That bell matters. Victorian houses increasingly use elaborate systems of bell pulls connecting principal rooms with servants' areas. Someone upstairs pulls a cord, and downstairs a labelled bell trembles or rings. A bedroom, a dressing room, perhaps the drawing room. Every ring is a request descending through architecture. The family does not need to shout. The house shouts for them. You straighten instinctively. Morning has properly arrived. Soon there will be breakfasts, beds, fires, water, clothing, cleaning, errands, deliveries, and instructions passing from one servant to another. Yet you do not rush wildly. Junior servants rush. You coordinate. That distinction is important. You have probably reached this position through years of domestic experience. A housekeeper is generally not a young beginner arriving directly from the countryside with one small box and terrified eyes. You know how houses function, because you have spent years watching them function. You know when a maid is genuinely ill. You know when someone is pretending not to have broken something. You know which stains require immediate treatment. You know how long candles should last. And you know that servants who believe nobody notices small thefts have seriously underestimated the woman carrying the keys. Another bell rings. Footsteps hurry along the passage. The smell of fresh coal smoke drifts through the house as fires awaken one by one. Above you, curtains are being opened onto a grey London morning. You return your attention to the keys resting against your dress. Soon you will unlock the cupboards. And once those doors open, the true arithmetic of the Victorian household begins. The keys rest against your dress with a faint metallic chime as you cross the housekeeper's room. Morning is strengthening outside, although London has not exactly become bright. Light filters through the windows in a grey wash, softened by smoke hanging over the streets. Somewhere beyond the walls, wheels grind over damp paving stones. A distant vendor calls something you cannot quite make out. And from below comes the steady domestic percussion of brushes, buckets, pokers, and coal scuttles. You have your own quieter music, key against lock turning, cupboard opening. This simple ritual tells you a great deal about your position. In a substantial Victorian household, the housekeeper is commonly entrusted with valuable domestic stores: tea, sugar, preserves, spices, candles, soap, linen, china, and other supplies may represent surprisingly serious sums of money. They cannot simply be left where anyone passing through the servants' corridor can help themselves. And so there are locks. Victorian domestic life loves locks. Cupboards have locks, storerooms have locks, wine cellars have locks, desks have locks, boxes have locks. Sometimes it feels as though half the respectable population of Britain is carrying keys to protect possessions from the other half. You choose one from your ring, The lock gives a satisfying click. Inside are supplies that appear ordinary to modern eyes but carry very different meanings in 1855. Tea, for example, is no trivial substance. Its price has fallen considerably compared with earlier generations, and consumption has spread widely through British society. But good tea remains valuable enough to deserve careful supervision. Sugar is increasingly common too, yet waste is still waste, and your employers expect you to account for what the household consumes. You lift a container. Your hand judges its weight almost automatically. Perhaps you have a written inventory. Perhaps much of the accounting lives in your memory. Either way, you develop an extraordinary familiarity with quantities. You know what a week's supply should look like. You know how quickly soap disappears. You know how many candles were issued. You know approximately how much tea should remain. This morning, something feels slightly wrong. You stare at the sugar. Not dramatically wrong. Nobody has apparently excavated the container with a soup ladle during the night, but there seems to be less than expected. You make a mental note. One of the practical responsibilities commonly associated with Victorian housekeepers is the careful distribution of household stores. Contemporary domestic manuals repeatedly emphasize economy, supervision, and accurate accounts. A well-run household is expected to avoid extravagance while never appearing mean. That is a delicate balance. Your employers want abundance upstairs and restraint downstairs. A guest should see a generous table. A servant should not casually take an extra spoonful of sugar. Victorian hierarchy can occasionally be summarized with remarkable efficiency. You measure what is needed for the morning. The cook will control much of the kitchen's immediate work, and depending upon the establishment, responsibilities between cook and housekeeper can overlap or become territorial. Senior servants possess their own domains, and humans have apparently always been capable of turning organizational charts into personal kingdoms. You therefore know when to interfere. More importantly, you know when not to. The cook may request ingredients or supplies. You issue what belongs under your control if relations between you are good. The exchange is efficient if relations are not good. Even a conversation about currents can acquire the atmosphere of an international negotiation. You continue along the shelves. Candles require attention. Gaslighting is spreading rapidly through Victorian London by 1855, especially in streets, public buildings, shops, and wealthier homes. But candles remain deeply woven into domestic life. Even a house fitted with gas may continue using candles in bedrooms or for portable illumination. Every flame costs something. Wax candles, particularly those made from beeswax or refined materials, can be expensive. Cheaper candles may smell unpleasant or burn less cleanly. You inspect the stock. A household cannot afford to discover at 10 in the evening that everyone has been enthusiastically illuminating bedrooms without restraint. Servants may therefore receive candle allowances. Imagine having your employer notice that your candle has burned 2 inches farther than expected. Suddenly, modern complaints about electricity bills feel almost luxurious. You close the cupboard and move toward another locked space. Here you may keep preserves. Jars stand in orderly rows. Their glass catches the weak morning light. Some contain fruits preserved during their season. Others hold jams, pickles, or bottled goods intended to carry the household through months when fresh produce becomes limited or expensive. You inspect them for spoilage. A damaged seal means trouble. A strange smell means more trouble. And anything fermenting that was not intended to ferment becomes today's unwanted adventure. One peculiar feature of 19th century household management is the enthusiasm for home preservation experiments. Domestic manuals offer instructions for everything from bottled fruits to elaborate pickles, often with the serene confidence of writers who will not personally be cleaning the pantry if something explodes. You tap a jar lightly. It behaves itself. Excellent. You move on. There are textiles under your care as well. Tablecloths, napkins, sheets, towels. Perhaps finer pieces reserved for guests or formal dinners. Textiles are expensive household property, and losing them is not equivalent to misplacing a cheap modern dishcloth. Linen may be marked, counted, recorded, repaired, rotated, and stored carefully. You open a cupboard and inhale. Clean cloth has its own smell, faintly soapy and dry. Your fingers pass across folded linen, smooth, cool, precisely stacked. There is comfort in this order. Upstairs, the family experiences domestic life as if objects simply appear when required. Fresh towels arrive, beds receive clean sheets, Candles stand ready, tea exists, soap exists, but nothing simply exists. Someone counts it, someone purchases it, someone stores it, someone distributes it, someone notices when it disappears. That someone is very often you. Researchers still disagree about how strictly these systems were followed in ordinary homes. Advice literature presents the ideal housekeeper as almost mathematically precise, but real households varied enormously according to wealth, personality, staffing levels, and the competence of employers. A chaotic family could transform even excellent domestic organization into permanent improvisation. You probably know such houses. Everyone in service does. Stories travel. A former maid remembers a mistress who counted lumps of sugar. Someone else worked where servants ate remarkably well. Another remembers a housekeeper who locked everything, including things nobody wanted. These stories become part warning, part entertainment. You close another cupboard, then you hear footsteps. A maid appears at the doorway. She stops respectfully. She needs clean cloths and additional soap for the morning work. You glance toward the supplies. How much was issued yesterday? You remember, or at least you think you remember. The maid waits. She is young, perhaps 17 or 18, her hands already reddened by water and cleaning chemicals. She has probably been awake nearly as long as you, but her morning contains far more scrubbing. You measure out what she requires, not too little. A stingy housekeeper creates resentment and poor cleaning, not too much. A careless housekeeper creates waste. You place the soap into her hands. She thanks you, before leaving. She hesitates. That hesitation interests you. Experienced housekeepers learn to recognize hesitation. There is apparently something she wishes to say. You wait. Finally she explains that another maid used an unusual amount of candle last night. Ah, the mysterious arithmetic begins to rearrange itself. Perhaps nothing improper happened. Perhaps someone was mending clothes late. Perhaps illness kept her awake. Or perhaps your missing sugar and your rapidly disappearing candles belong to a more interesting story. You do not accuse anyone. Not yet. Authority works better when it does not constantly announce itself. You simply nod. The maid disappears into the passage. Your keys return to your waist. You close the final cupboard and test the lock, secure, around you. The household grows louder. Bells ring, doors open, footsteps multiply overhead. Soon the servants themselves will gather for breakfast, bringing their tired faces, private friendships, little rivalries, rumours, complaints, and careful awareness of rank. You pocket the thought about the candle and the sugar, because downstairs, even breakfast has a hierarchy. The smell reaches you before you enter the servants' room. Hot tea, toast, perhaps bacon, depending upon the household's generosity and the morning's arrangements. There is also the familiar scent of coal smoke clinging to clothing, mixed with soap, damp wool, and the warm heaviness of rooms where several people have been working since before sunrise. Breakfast below stairs is not merely breakfast. It is a small daily ceremony of rank. You enter without hurry. Conversation softens slightly. Not completely, because you are not the master or mistress of the house, yet your presence changes the atmosphere. Younger servants straighten almost without realizing it. A housemaid pulls in her chair. Someone who had been whispering decides that whatever was being whispered can wait. You notice this. Naturally, you notice everything. At the table sits a miniature version of Victorian society. There may be the butler, cook, footman, housemaids, kitchen maids, perhaps a lady's maid or valet depending upon the household, in larger establishments. Servants can number well into double figures, creating a complicated community hidden behind the polished rooms upstairs. Not everyone necessarily eats together. Senior servants often enjoy privileges unavailable to those lower in the hierarchy. The butler and housekeeper may dine separately or preside over meals in the servants' hall. Depending upon local custom and the size of the establishment, the cook occupies another senior position, especially where elaborate meals make her expertise valuable. You sit. Tea is poured. The cup warms your fingers. For a moment, after hours of waking, dressing, checking stores, listening to bells, and opening cupboards, you finally eat. The first mouthful feels almost luxurious. Almost. Then someone asks a question about the day's work. Of course they do. You answer calmly. The upper bedrooms must be thoroughly attended to. A particular room requires fresh linen. The drawing room needs additional attention before expected callers. One carpet has collected mud near the entrance and must be dealt with before the mistress notices, because the mistress noticing first would be unfortunate. A central feature of 19th century domestic service is this rigid hierarchy among servants themselves. The difference between a senior servant and a junior one affects not only duties but sometimes meals, sleeping arrangements, clothing, leisure, and even whom a servant may comfortably socialise with. You might all be servants in the eyes of the family, among yourselves. The distinctions are far more precise. A scullery maid occupies one of the lowest positions. Her work is exhausting. She cleans pots, washes dishes, scrubs kitchen equipment, carries water, deals with grease, ash, food scraps, and the general aftermath of everyone else's labour. Her hands reveal her occupation across from her. A footman presents a very different image. His appearance matters. Height can even influence employability, particularly in fashionable households where matching tall footmen become part servant, part decoration. Yes, Victorian Britain occasionally manages to turn human height into interior design. The footman may wear livery when serving upstairs, answer doors, carry messages, assist at table, and perform tasks designed to make the household appear prosperous and orderly. The housemaids inhabit another world. They clean bedrooms, passages, sitting rooms, fireplaces, furniture, and countless surfaces that seem determined to become dirty immediately after being cleaned. And then there is you, the housekeeper. You occupy a curious social position. You're unquestionably a servant, yet you are expected to command servants. You must be deferential upward and authoritative downward, too familiar with your employers, and boundaries blur, too distant from your staff, and resentment grows, too friendly with junior servants, and discipline may weaken, too severe, and the household becomes miserable. So you cultivate a particular manner, warm enough, reserved enough, watchful without appearing suspicious. That last one is especially useful this morning. You drink your tea, your eyes move casually around the table. Who looks tired? Most of them. That proves nothing. Who seems nervous? Possibly the younger housemaid near the end. Again, nothing. You remember the missing sugar, then the candle. You butter a piece of toast. No interrogation occurs. Breakfast continues. Servants talk about ordinary things. Someone mentions the weather. Another has heard that a nearby household is looking for a new cook. A maid complains discreetly about the soot that has somehow returned to a grate she cleaned yesterday. London soot possesses persistence worthy of admiration. There is laughter, quiet laughter, but genuine. Domestic servants are not machines silently performing duties. They form friendships, dislike one another, exchange jokes, fall in love, become homesick, gossip, lend money, borrow clothing, quarrel over responsibilities, and share information about employers. One wonderfully human detail found throughout accounts of service is the strength of servants' informal information networks. A household's reputation can travel surprisingly far below stairs. Prospective servants want to know whether wages are paid properly, whether food is adequate, whether the mistress is demanding, and whether servants receive reasonable time away. The employers request references, the servants, in their own fashion. Investigate the employers. Fair enough. You hear a small burst of laughter. The kitchen maid has apparently described something that happened during yesterday's delivery. The cook silences her with a glance. You hide the beginning of a smile behind your cup. Maintaining dignity does not require becoming entirely humourless. In fact, humour may be one of the quiet tools that makes domestic life tolerable. There is endless work. Hours can be painfully long. Privacy is limited. Freedom is restricted. Servants live where they work, meaning there is rarely a clean boundary between employment and personal life. If a bell rings, someone answers. If a guest arrives late, someone remains awake. If a child becomes sick, routines change. If the family entertains, servants work harder. You cannot exactly announce that you are unavailable because your shift has ended. The Victorian household would stare at you in confusion. Historians continue to question how rigidly servant hierarchies operated from house to house. Domestic manuals describe clear ranks, yet diaries and memoirs reveal flexibility. Smaller households often required servants to perform overlapping duties, while larger establishments could maintain elaborate distinctions. London contains both worlds in one grand mansion. Dozens of servants may inhabit a nearly invisible community. Several streets away, A single maid of all work may attempt to perform almost everything. You are fortunate. Relatively speaking, your position brings status. It may also bring higher wages than those earned by junior female servants. You possess experience and responsibility that make you valuable. But responsibility has its price. A spoon drops. The sound seems absurdly loud. The young maid retrieves it quickly. Breakfast is ending, chairs move, cups empty. The room begins transforming from a social space back into part of the working machinery. You give several instructions. One maid is assigned to the drawing room, another must finish the bedrooms. Someone is reminded about the front stairs. The younger servants rise. Then, just before they scatter, you notice something. The maid you'd been watching slips a small folded object into her pocket. Perhaps a letter. Interesting. You say nothing. She leaves with the others. Soon only senior servants remain for another moment, surrounded by crumbs, empty cups, and the fading warmth of breakfast. You stand. Your brief pause is finished. Above stairs. Beds wait to be made. Carpets wait to be brushed. Furniture waits to be polished. Fireplaces wait to be cleaned. And every room must somehow look untouched by the labour required to maintain it. You smooth your dress. Then you follow the servants upstairs, where the morning inspection is already waiting. You follow the servants upstairs, and almost immediately the atmosphere changes. Below stairs, the house sounds alive with pans, voices, coal, footsteps, and hurried instructions. Here, in the rooms occupied by the family, labour is supposed to become invisible. The transformation is remarkable. A housemaid kneels before a fireplace, working carefully at the grate. Another moves through a bedroom carrying a basin. Curtains have been drawn back, allowing the grey London morning to settle across polished furniture. Somewhere nearby, a window has been opened briefly, and cold air carries in the smells of damp stone, horses, chimney smoke, and the enormous waking city beyond. You enter the first room. Your eyes begin working before your feet stop moving. Fireplace, carpet, furniture. Curtains, washstand, bed, mirror, dust. There is always dust. London in 1855 produces it with extraordinary generosity. Coal fires warm houses. Factories burn fuel. Thousands of chimneys release smoke. Horses fill the streets, and wheels disturb mud and dirt. Even respectable neighbourhoods cannot seal themselves completely against the atmosphere outside. A maid may clean a surface in the morning only to discover a faint film returning surprisingly soon. You run one finger discreetly along a piece of furniture. Clean. Good. The maid notices your inspection. You say nothing. Sometimes silence communicates approval more efficiently than praise. You move toward the fireplace. Cleaning a Victorian grate is hardly the charming domestic ritual later paintings might suggest. Ash must be removed, soot controlled, metal cleaned, and fuel prepared. The servant performing the task works close to dirt before being expected to move on and make other rooms immaculate. That contradiction follows housemaids everywhere. Create cleanliness while becoming dirty yourself. A black mark has appeared near the hearth. You point toward it. The maid sees it immediately. "I'll attend to it, ma'am." You nod. There is no need for drama. A competent housekeeper does not transform every missed speck into a moral crisis. Although some Victorian advice writers occasionally sound as though civilization itself depends upon properly polished furniture, you proceed into the bedroom. The bed has been opened to air. This is important. Victorian household guides commonly recommend airing beds and bedrooms, rather than immediately trapping the night's warmth and moisture beneath neatly arranged covers. Windows may be opened when weather permits, bedding turned back, mattresses attended to, and chambers ventilated. Fresh air carries enormous moral and medical significance in 19th century thinking. Not all the reasoning behind it is scientifically accurate by modern standards, but the instinct that stuffy rooms benefit from ventilation is certainly useful. You touch the bedding. Cool now. The maid will remake it shortly. Nearby sits a washstand with basin and jug. Running water in bedrooms cannot yet be taken for granted. Even in prosperous homes, servants carry enormous quantities of water through houses. Hot water must be heated. Cold water must be fetched. Dirty water must be removed. You glance at the basin. Someone upstairs experiences the pleasant convenience of washing. Someone downstairs experiences the bucket. Such is domestic technology in 1855. You continue along the corridor. Your shoes make almost no sound against the carpet. Ahead, another housemaid works with a broom. Carpet cleaning demands effort. Without modern vacuum cleaners, servants rely on sweeping, brushing, beating, and various preparations intended to remove dirt or revive colours. Rugs and carpets may sometimes be taken outside and beaten, releasing clouds of dust impressive enough to make you question whether the dirt had secretly been multiplying. One piece of household advice from the period recommends scattering damp tea leaves over carpets before sweeping. The idea is that the moist leaves help collect dust rather than allowing it to rise freely into the room, so yesterday's tea may enjoy a second career as cleaning equipment. Victorian recycling can be surprisingly inventive. You watch the maid work. She moves efficiently. Good servants learn rhythm. Brush, gather, move, check, repeat. There is little wasted motion. You inspect the skirting boards, then the corners. Corners reveal things. Dust enjoys corners because people prefer not to look there. You do. A faint grey line has gathered near the wall. You crouch slightly. The maid sees where you're looking. Her shoulders sink almost imperceptibly. Again, you do not scold. That edge as well, please. Yes, ma'am. You move onward. Your authority depends partly upon consistency. If one servant is corrected for something another is allowed to ignore, resentment follows quickly. Household management involves objects, but it also involves emotions. And emotions are harder to inventory than soap. You enter the drawing room. Here the standards rise. This is a room visitors may see. Everything therefore participates in the family's public identity. Chairs stand correctly. Tables are arranged. Decorative objects occupy deliberate positions. Curtains hang properly. The fireplace must look cared for. Mirrors must not advertise fingerprints. The room should appear comfortable without showing the labour behind that comfort. You adjust a small object on a table, only slightly. Perhaps nobody else would notice. You notice. By mid-century, middle and upper-class Victorian interiors are becoming increasingly crowded with furnishings, textiles, ornaments, framed pictures, books, and decorative possessions. Every additional object creates another surface requiring attention. Fashion upstairs becomes workload downstairs. A minimalist interior would probably seem suspiciously empty to many respectable Victorians. To a housemaid, it might resemble paradise. You approach the window. Outside, London moves beneath a pale sky. A carriage passes. A man walks briskly along the pavement. A delivery cart stops farther down the street. For perhaps 3 seconds, you simply watch. Then you see your own faint reflection in the glass. Cap neat, dress correct, keys at your waist. You turn back toward the room. Exactly how much direct inspection a real housekeeper performs depends greatly on the establishment. Surviving manuals often prescribe orderly chains of supervision, while memoirs and household records suggest that actual practice could bend according to staffing, personality, illness, family habits, and sheer necessity. In some houses, the mistress herself appears everywhere. In others, the housekeeper enjoys considerable freedom to organise work. Here, much depends upon you. A maid enters carrying fresh water. You step aside. She places it carefully on a table. Then you notice her sleeve. There is a dark smear near the cuff. Soot. She looks down. Her face changes. Apparently she had not noticed. You almost smile. Change it before you are wanted downstairs. Relief crosses her face. Yes, ma'am. A small correction, but appearances matter. A servant unexpectedly encountering a family member should look tidy enough not to advertise the filthy work performed minutes earlier. The household wants cleanliness without evidence of cleaning, comfort without evidence of effort, order without evidence of management, and you are responsible for maintaining that illusion. Another bell rings somewhere below, then another. Morning is accelerating. You leave the drawing room and cross toward the bedrooms again. One bed is nearly finished. You inspect the sheets, smooth, pillows properly arranged. The chamber smells faintly of soap and fresh air rather than the night's enclosed warmth. You approve. Then a housemaid appears at the doorway, slightly breathless. Ma'am, you turn. There has been a disagreement. Of course there has. 2 maids both insist that a particular task belongs to the other. You glance once around the immaculate room. Furniture polished, fire prepared, bed made. Nothing here reveals that the servants maintaining this calm interior are perfectly capable of becoming furious over a cleaning cloth. You step into the corridor, the maid follows. Downstairs, the sugar remains unexplained, the candle remains unexplained, And now 2 members of your staff are waiting for you to settle a quarrel before it spreads through the morning. Managing rooms, you reflect, is considerably easier than managing people. You walk toward the stairs. You find the disagreement waiting near the service staircase. 2 housemaids stand several feet apart, which is usually a bad sign. If they were merely confused, they would probably be standing together. Distance suggests principal has become involved, and once principal enters a servant's quarrel, even a cleaning cloth can acquire constitutional importance. The older maid speaks first. She insists the younger woman was supposed to finish the back staircase. The younger maid insists she was told to attend to the upper bedrooms. Both look at you. There is a brief silence. From somewhere below comes the clang of a saucepan. A bell rings in the distance. Outside, carriage wheels pass over the street. The household continues while you conduct diplomacy. You ask one question, then another. You do not raise your voice. That would be unnecessary. A housekeeper who must shout constantly has already surrendered part of her authority. You reconstruct the morning instructions. The younger maid was indeed assigned to the bedrooms, but she was also expected to assist with the staircase afterward. The older maid assumed this meant immediately. The younger one assumed it meant whenever she finished upstairs. There it is. Not laziness, not rebellion, just ambiguity. You divide the remaining work between them. Neither looks delighted. Excellent. A compromise that pleases nobody equally may be the purest form of management. They leave. You remain for a moment beside the stairs. Managing female servants occupies a substantial part of your position. A prosperous London household may employ several housemaids, each with duties determined by experience and rank. There might be an upper housemaid, lower housemaid, stillroom maid, kitchen maid, scullery maid, nursery servants, and personal attendants. Although arrangements differ enormously between houses, your task is to make these overlapping lives function as one system. Unfortunately, systems contain people. People become tired. People misunderstand instructions. People dislike one another for reasons that began 6 months ago and now involve a missing hairpin nobody remembers clearly. You descend. Near the bottom, you encounter the youngest housemaid carrying a pail. She moves carefully because the pail is full. Her hands are red. You notice that immediately. Frequent exposure to cold water, hot water, soap, soda, blacklead, cleaning compounds, and rough work can punish servants' skin. Domestic labour is physically demanding in ways that elegant upstairs rooms carefully conceal. You ask whether her hands are sore. She looks surprised. Only a little, ma'am. Only a little. The traditional servant's answer to almost everything short of losing a limb. You tell her to use the ointment kept for cracked skin when she has a moment. She thanks you and continues. Kindness has practical value. A maid whose hands become badly cracked cannot work efficiently. But there is another reason. You remember being younger. Perhaps you began service as a housemaid yourself. Many housekeepers rise through years of experience rather than arriving directly in senior positions. You remember carrying water. You remember aching feet. You remember being corrected by women who seemed impossibly old when they were probably 40. Now younger servants look at you that way, a mildly offensive development. You return to your room and find a maid waiting outside, not the one with sore hands. This is the girl you noticed at breakfast, the one with the folded object. She asks whether she may speak privately. You open the door. She enters. Immediately. You know this is not about dust. Her fingers keep touching the edge of her apron. You wait. Eventually she produces the folded paper, a letter. You do not take it. She explains. A young man has written to her. There are few forces capable of disturbing a carefully organized household as efficiently as romance. The young man works nearby. She knows him through her family. He wants to meet her on her next permitted afternoon out. She's asking whether this is allowed. The question is more complicated than it sounds. Servants' personal lives are frequently subject to employer control. Rules governing visitors, courtship, evenings out, and conduct vary between households, but respectable service demands respectable behaviour. A servant suspected of improper conduct may lose not merely her position, but the valuable character reference needed to secure another. You study her face. She is frightened that you will refuse. You ask whether her family knows the man. Yes, her mother knows his mother. That helps. You ask where they intend to meet, in daylight. That helps more. You tell her she may go during her proper time away. provided her work is finished and she returns when expected. Her entire posture changes. Relief. Then you add that he is not to enter the servants' areas. She nods rapidly. You almost laugh. Apparently she is transformed from suspected criminal into grateful citizen within 30 seconds. One slightly unexpected feature of domestic service is how much senior servants can become guardians of younger employees' private conduct. The housekeeper may occupy an almost maternal position, particularly toward girls living away from their families for the first time. Of course, not every housekeeper is maternal. Some are terrifying. Servants' memoirs preserve memories of senior staff who could make a young maid tremble merely by entering a room. You prefer another method. Fear produces obedience while you are watching. Respect works when you are not. The girl turns to leave. Then you remember the candle. You ask whether she was awake late last night. She freezes. Interesting. You keep your tone ordinary. She admits she was, reading the letter. There we are. The extra candle has found its explanation. You remind her that candles are issued carefully and cannot simply burn until midnight whenever romance produces several pages of handwriting. Her face becomes bright red. You tell her not to repeat it. She promises. The mystery of the candle closes quietly. The sugar, however, remains at large. After she leaves, you sit at your table. You make several notes, work assignments, supplies, a repair needed upstairs. The household operates partly through memory and partly through records. But even the neatest rules cannot fully capture daily reality. Researchers examining domestic manuals alongside servants' memoirs have long noticed the gap between prescribed discipline and lived relationships. How much authority senior female servants actually exercised could shift dramatically depending on the mistress, the size of the establishment, and the personalities involved. Your authority today feels substantial. Tomorrow, the mistress might decide to reorganize everything, such as power in service. You command, but you remain commanded. A knock interrupts your thoughts. The older maid from the staircase dispute appears. You expect another complaint. Instead, she tells you the younger maid has been crying. You close your notebook. Why? Apparently she received news from home yesterday. Her father has lost work. There it is again. The private world beneath the uniform. You find the younger maid in a passage, pretending to polish something that has already been polished thoroughly enough to reflect the future. You speak quietly. She tells you her family needs money. She hopes to send part of her wages home. You listen. There is little you can solve immediately, but listening itself matters. Domestic servants often maintain strong economic ties to families outside the household. Wages may help parents, younger siblings, or relatives, and service can provide food and lodging while allowing a young woman to save or send money home. You give her a few minutes to compose herself. Then you remind her gently that the back staircase still exists. She laughs despite herself. Good, you leave her working. There are tears below stairs, romances below stairs, rivalries below stairs, worries about money and family and futures, yet upstairs. The drawing room remains perfectly calm. That is the strange achievement of the household. Human disorder produces visible order, and tomorrow you will manage it all again. For now, however, a different kind of order demands attention. Sheets, towels, napkins, tablecloths. An entire kingdom of folded fabric is waiting behind another locked door. The linen cupboard greets you with one of the more comforting smells in the entire house. Soap, dry cotton, clean linen, a faint trace of lavender, perhaps, tucked among folded cloth to keep everything pleasantly scented. After coal smoke, damp passages, fireplace ash, and the complicated emotions of your housemaids. There is something wonderfully uncomplicated about a shelf of clean sheets. Sheets do not quarrel. Napkins do not fall in love. Towels rarely receive troubling letters from home. You unlock the door. Inside, the shelves rise in careful rows. Sheets are folded into neat rectangles. Pillowcases sit in separate piles. Towels occupy another shelf. Tablecloths, napkins, dusters, and various household textiles are arranged according to use and quality. You run your fingers across the nearest stack. Smooth, cool, heavy. To a Victorian household, this is not disposable material, it is property. Good linen costs money and may remain in use for years. Pieces can be marked with initials or numbers, recorded in household inventories, inspected for damage, repaired repeatedly, and eventually demoted from prestigious duties to increasingly humble ones. A fine sheet begins life on a respectable bed. Years later, part of it may end up as cleaning cloth, domestic reincarnation. You begin counting 1, 2, 3. The work is almost meditative. You compare the number before you with your records. Everything agrees. For now, the table linen comes next. A formal Victorian dining table depends heavily upon immaculate cloth. A stained tablecloth cannot simply be disguised beneath strategically placed plates and optimism. It must be treated, washed, pressed, and returned in suitable condition. You unfold one corner. There, a faint mark, possibly gravy. You stare at it with the solemn disappointment of a detective discovering evidence. Someone has failed to remove it completely. You set the cloth aside. It will need another treatment. Laundry in 1855 is exhausting work, particularly when performed for a large household. Water must be heated, fabrics sorted, stains treated, garments soaked, rubbed, boiled where appropriate, rinsed, wrung, dried, mangled or pressed, folded, and returned. Machines exist for certain stages of laundry, and commercial laundries are becoming part of urban life. But there is no modern appliance quietly humming while you drink tea. Wash day can dominate an entire working day, sometimes more than one, in a substantial household. Laundry may be handled by dedicated laundry maids, sent outside, or managed through a mixture of internal and external labour. Your role is often supervisory. You ensure that what leaves the cupboard eventually comes back. Preferably as the same object, you carry the stained cloth toward better light. Stain removal itself has developed into an impressive body of domestic knowledge. Different marks require different treatments. Grease behaves differently from wine. Ink creates its own problems. Wax requires another approach. Blood, fruit, mud, rust, tea, and scorch marks each demand judgment. Household manuals offer remedies involving soap, lemon, salt, spirits, chalk, milk, boiling water, cold water, and various chemical substances that make modern readers wonder how many servants accidentally conducted chemistry experiments in the laundry. One particularly imaginative tradition involves using sunlight as part of whitening and stain removal. Linen can be spread outdoors when space and weather permit, allowing light, air, moisture, and repeated treatment to help brighten fabric. In London, of course, fresh air is a relative concept. You might put clean linen outside only to have the city season it gently with soot. You fold the tablecloth again. A maid arrives carrying a basket, used bedroom linen. You examine the contents, sheets, pillowcases, towels. She gives you the room numbers, and you compare them with what should have been removed. This counting may seem tedious, but missing linen is serious. A careless servant may misplace something. A laundress may fail to return an item, a damaged piece may disappear rather than be reported, and, occasionally, theft is possible. You count again. Something is wrong. One pillowcase is missing. You look into the basket. Still missing. The maid looks into the basket too, as though another pillowcase might materialize if sufficiently embarrassed. Which room? She tells you. You send her back to check. There is no accusation. Not yet. A pillowcase can hide beneath a mattress, fall behind furniture, become mixed with another room's laundry, or simply remain where nobody thought to look. Your work teaches patience. Suspicion is useful. Premature certainty is not. While she searches, you inspect several sheets for wear. One has thinned near the centre. You hold it toward the window. Light passes through the weakened fibres. This sheet will need attention. Mending extends the useful life of household textiles. Tiers can be darned or patched. Worn sections may be reinforced. Large pieces can sometimes be cut down and repurposed. Nothing good is discarded casually. That thrift sits strangely beside the abundance visible upstairs. Guests may see polished silver, generous dinners, rich curtains, and spotless tablecloths. Behind the scenes, you are deciding whether a worn sheet can survive another 6 months. That contrast is deeply Victorian. Display and economy live under the same roof. How regularly prosperous households replaced linen is difficult to generalize. Account books, household guides, inventories, and surviving textiles reveal careful management. Yet actual practice varies with wealth and personal habits. One family may replace worn goods readily, another may squeeze astonishing service from every scrap. You suspect your employers belong somewhere in the middle, respectable, comfortable, not eager to waste money. A reasonable arrangement provided nobody expects miracles. The maid returns. She's carrying this pillowcase. It had slipped between the bedstead and wall. Mystery solved. She looks relieved. You take it. Then you notice something else. A tear near one seam. Small. Repairable. You place it with the mending. The maid turns to go. Wait. She stops. You ask whether the upper bedroom towels were changed. She thinks. That pause is enough. Apparently not. You send her back. Her shoulders fall. Housekeeping is partly the art of remembering what everyone else forgets. You return to your inventory. There are clean napkins to count. Some households possess remarkably large quantities of table linen, especially where entertaining is frequent. Napkins must be spotless, folded, stored, and rotated. Fine damask may carry woven patterns visible when light falls across it. You unfold one. The fabric feels substantial beneath your fingers. Someone upstairs will wipe a mouth with it tonight and never think about the labour contained in that square of cloth. You will. You know who washed it, who dried it, who pressed it, who folded it, who counted it, and who will notice if it fails to return. You replace the stack. The cupboard is orderly again. Then your attention shifts toward another shelf. Soap supplies are lower than expected. Not alarmingly low, but lower. You remember the sugar. The candle mystery had an innocent explanation. Perhaps the sugar will too. You close the linen cupboard and turn the key. The metallic click echoes softly. Beyond the door, the household continues consuming everything required to keep itself respectable. Soap, candles, tea, sugar, polish, food, coal. And now it is time to return to those locked stores, where every missing ounce tells some kind of story. You return to the stores with the linen cupboard still fresh in your mind. The missing pillowcase turned out to be innocent enough. The extra candle had been consumed by a young maid reading a letter from an admirer. Two mysteries have therefore collapsed into ordinary explanations. The sugar remains. You unlock the store cupboard. Morning light has strengthened, but the passage is still dim enough that the shelves seem to disappear into shadow. Jars, tins, boxes, bottles, and wrapped packages stand in disciplined rows. You take out your notebook. There is comfort in quantities. People can misunderstand you. Numbers are generally less imaginative. You begin with tea. The household consumes plenty of it. Tea has become deeply embedded in British daily life by 1855, appearing at breakfast tables, during afternoon refreshments, in servants' rooms, and whenever somebody decides that another cup might improve matters, which, in Britain, is frequently. The great expansion of tea drinking during the 18th and 19th centuries transforms it from an expensive luxury into a drink consumed across social classes. Duties on tea have been reduced over time, legal imports have expanded, and respectable households now regard it as nearly indispensable. Yet you still treat it carefully. You open the container. The dry leaves release a faint, distinctive scent. You measure what is required. Next comes coffee, then sugar. You pause. There it is. The level still seems wrong. You check your notes. Perhaps you misremembered. You rarely do. But confidence is not evidence. You calculate what has been issued. Breakfast, kitchen use, tea for the servants, allowances for upstairs. The numbers do not quite agree with what remains. Not enough sugar is missing to justify summoning Scotland Yard. Enough is missing to annoy you. You close the container. There are several possibilities. Someone has taken some. Someone has used more than reported. Someone measured carelessly. Or you made an error. You keep that final possibility alive because experienced managers understand something inexperienced ones often do not. Being in charge does not make you infallible. You move to the candles. Their numbers now make sense. Good. Soap comes next. That supply is falling rapidly, but the explanation may simply be laundry and cleaning. A large household consumes soap in quantities that would surprise anyone accustomed to modern concentrated detergents. There are different kinds for different purposes. Soap for personal washing, soap for laundry, soap for household cleaning. Some varieties are harsher than others, and servants working repeatedly with strong soap or washing soda may end the day with painfully dry hands. You think again of the young maid carrying the pail. Every shining surface upstairs leaves some small mark downstairs. You record the remaining supply, then you inspect the candles more closely. Tallow candles are cheaper but can smoke, smell, and require trimming. Better quality candles burn more pleasantly. Beeswax carries prestige. while stearine and other improved materials are increasingly changing 19th century lighting. Before electric light, managing illumination is an entire domestic economy. A careless servant can literally burn money. You pick up a candle, solid, simple, almost elegant. It is easy to forget how much labour hides inside an object this ordinary. Someone made it, someone transported it, someone purchased it, you stored it. A servant carries it upstairs. Then, hour by hour, it disappears into light, you replace it. Farther along the shelf sit cleaning materials. Blacklid for grates, polishing substances, brushes, cloths, perhaps beeswax or preparations for furniture. The Victorian passion for polished surfaces requires an impressive arsenal. One recipe circulating in domestic advice recommends mixtures for furniture polish that involve wax and turpentine. Other preparations promise miraculous results for brass, silver, floors, glass, or stains. Household manuals sometimes read like cookbooks written by people who have become dangerously interested in solvents. You imagine handing one to a modern health and safety officer. The poor person would need tea, possibly something stronger. A knock comes at the door. The cook enters. She needs sugar. Of course she does. You look at her. She looks at you. Neither woman says anything for a second. How much? She tells you. You measure it. Then, casually, you ask whether additional sugar was required yesterday. The cook thinks, yes, there was a custard that did not set properly. It had to be remade. You wait. She remembers another thing. One of the preserves was too sharp, so additional sugar went into that as well. There it is. The fugitive sugar has surrendered. You ask why it was not mentioned. The cook looks mildly offended. She thought she had mentioned it. You thought she had not. For several seconds. The great mystery of the pantry becomes a dispute over memory. Then you both recognize how ridiculous this is. Not openly, naturally. Senior servants possess standards, but the cook's mouth twitches. So does yours. You adjust the record. Mystery solved. Again. This is probably closer to real household life than dramatic tales of constant theft. Supplies certainly could disappear, and employers worried about pilfering, but ordinary mistakes, waste, spoilage, poor communication, and inaccurate measurement also complicated domestic accounts. How much actual petty theft occurred behind respectable Victorian doors is almost impossible to calculate. Manuals frequently warn against dishonesty. While servants' recollections sometimes portray such suspicions as exaggerated or insulting, the truth shifts from household to household. Hidden among thousands of ordinary kitchens that left little testimony behind, your sugar, at least, was sacrificed to custard, a respectable death. The cook takes her measured portion. Before leaving, she asks whether more soap should be ordered. You agree. That means another responsibility. Purchasing. Household supplies arrive through networks of local tradespeople, grocers, butchers, bakers, dairymen, coal merchants, fishmongers, and other suppliers serve London homes regularly. Orders may be delivered directly to the house. This creates another area where vigilance matters. Goods must be checked. Quantities must be correct. Quality must be acceptable. Bills must correspond with deliveries. A dishonest supplier can cost the household money just as easily as a careless servant. Later, a delivery arrives. You hear it before you see it. A knock. Footsteps. Voices near the service entrance. A maid comes to fetch you. The grocer's boy stands with goods. He looks cold. His boots are muddy from the London streets. You inspect the delivery. Tea, soap, a package of spices, several other items. You check them against the order. Everything seems correct. Then you inspect the soap. One piece is damaged. You point it out. The boy looks at it as though hoping concentrated thought might repair the corner. It does not. You tell him it must be accounted for. He nods. You're polite. Firm, but polite. There is no benefit in humiliating a delivery boy for damaged soap. He probably did not make it. He probably did not pack it, and he certainly does not own the grocer's shop. You sign or acknowledge the delivery according to the household's practice. The goods come inside, the door closes, London remains outside. You carry the supplies back toward your domain. The shelves will be replenished. The soap recorded, the sugar corrected for one satisfying moment. Everything balances. Then a bell rings. A maid appears almost immediately. The mistress wants to know whether the drawing room is ready for callers this afternoon. You look toward your carefully arranged shelves. Tea, sugar, candles, soap, quiet little objects. Yet within a few hours, they will support another performance upstairs. Visitors will arrive. Tea will appear, rooms will glow, servants will move silently, nobody will see your notebook, nobody will hear the locks opening, nobody will know that this morning you investigated missing sugar and negotiated over damaged soap. They will simply see a respectable London household functioning beautifully. You close the cupboard, turn the key, and prepare to translate the mistress's expectations into work. The summons from upstairs reaches you through a maid rather than a bell. The mistress would like to see you, ma'am. You close the cupboard and hand the last package of soap aside for storage. There is nothing unusual about being called upstairs, but your posture changes almost automatically. Below stairs, you give instructions. Above stairs, you receive them. That distinction follows you as you climb. The service staircase is narrower and plainer than the principal staircase used by the family and guests. This is deliberate. Victorian domestic architecture often separates circulation according to rank, allowing servants to move through back stairs, corridors, basement passages, and service doors without constantly crossing the family's path. The house itself understands hierarchy. You emerge into a brighter corridor. Carpet softens your footsteps. The smell changes too. Less coal and cooking, more polished wood, flowers, fabric, perhaps perfume lingering from someone who passed earlier. You reach the mistress's morning room. A maid announces you. You enter. Your employer sits near a window with correspondence beside her. You stand respectfully. She explains that callers may arrive this afternoon. Nothing elaborate. Only tea. You have been in service long enough to understand that the words "nothing elaborate" can be extremely dangerous. She wants the drawing room particularly well arranged. The better tea service should be used. There should be cake, perhaps sandwiches, fresh flowers if suitable ones can be obtained, and the fire must be kept cheerful. You listen. Each pleasant little request becomes several tasks the moment it crosses into your world. Cake means ingredients, preparation, baking, cooling, cutting, plating, and washing afterward. Tea means water, fuel, tea leaves, sugar, milk, cups, saucers, spoons, trays, cloths, and servants available at the correct moment. Fresh flowers mean acquiring them, trimming them, arranging them, finding suitable vessels, and cleaning whatever mess their stems leave behind. A cheerful fire means coal. Comfort has an infrastructure. Your mistress does not necessarily ignore this. Many Victorian women of comfortable households understand domestic management extremely well. Some supervise accounts closely, plan meals, inspect linen, direct servants, and work regularly with their housekeepers. Others prefer distance. Your employer falls somewhere between. She knows what she wants. You know how to make it happen. That partnership can work beautifully as long as neither woman forgets where Victorian society believes the boundary lies. You ask how many callers she expects. Perhaps 6, possibly 8, maybe 10. Wonderful. Victorian arithmetic has returned. You clarify whether anyone is expected to remain for dinner. She does not think so. Those words receive a small mental underline. You ask several more questions. Then comes the request you were hoping not to hear. The curtains in the drawing room looked slightly dull yesterday. Could something be done? You maintain your expression. Certainly, ma'am, inside your head. Several housemaids begin screaming. You leave the room. The door closes. For 3 steps. You remain the perfectly composed senior servant. On the 4th, you begin calculating. The curtains cannot be properly removed and cleaned before afternoon callers. That would be absurd. They can, however, be brushed, arranged, checked for dust, and made to look fresher. You reach the service staircase. A maid is coming upward. You stop her. Find Mary and send her to the drawing room. The machinery starts. By the time you reach the lower floor, 3 people have new instructions. The cook hears about the cake. A housemaid hears about the curtains. Another is told to inspect the best tea service. Nobody applauds. The cook asks how many guests. Possibly 10. She gives you a look suggesting that 10 is not a number but a personal insult. You leave before negotiations begin. This constant translation between social desire and physical labour defines much of your day. Upstairs. Someone wants a warmer room. Downstairs. Coal must be carried. Upstairs. Someone wants fresh water. Downstairs. A servant lifts it. Upstairs. Someone changes clothes. Downstairs. Garments require brushing, cleaning, mending, storing, or laundering. The division is so deeply embedded in prosperous 19th century life that many activities remain almost invisible precisely because servants perform them successfully. In 1851, the census recorded domestic service as one of the largest fields of female employment in Britain, and its importance remains unmistakable in the middle of the decade. Thousands upon thousands of women live inside households that are not their own, performing the labour required to sustain middle and upper class comfort. Yet proximity does not create equality. You may know your employer's habits intimately. You know when she likes tea. You know which rooms she prefers warm. You may know which guests make her nervous. You may even know more about the household's daily functioning than some members of the family. Still, you're expected to preserve distance. Familiarity is dangerous. The Victorian ideal of a respectable servant prizes discretion. You see, you hear, you do not repeat. This can create strange situations. A servant carrying coal may overhear an argument. A housemaid changing sheets may discover a letter left open. A lady's maid may know secrets about clothing, health, money, or romance. A housekeeper may understand the family's finances are tightening long before dinner guests suspect anything. Silence becomes part of the service you provide. One surviving strain of Victorian humour repeatedly plays with the supposedly invisible servant who hears everything while standing quietly at the edge of a room. The joke works because everyone understands the contradiction. Servants are expected to be present without seeming present. You could hardly design a better occupation for collecting gossip. The challenge is surviving without using it. You enter the drawing room. Mary is already brushing carefully around the curtains. Dust catches in a shaft of weak sunlight. You inspect the fabric. Dull is not the word you would have chosen. They look like curtains, but the mistress has noticed them, which means they have become important. You help determine what can safely be done. The maid works. You adjust the folds. Another servant enters with the tea service. You inspect each piece. No chips, no obvious marks. Silver spoons must be polished. The tray needs attention. You send it back. This is how a single sentence spoken upstairs multiplies downstairs. By noon, perhaps 20 separate actions will have grown from only tea. Exactly how smoothly mistress and housekeeper cooperated is difficult to reconstruct from prescriptive literature alone. Manuals often describe a clean chain of command, but private writings reveal everything from genuine mutual trust to resentment, interference, and constant conflict. Personality could matter as much as formal rank. You know households where the mistress checks every cupboard. You know others where the housekeeper effectively governs everything domestic. Neither extreme guarantees happiness. A bell rings. You look toward the door. A maid arrives. The mistress has remembered something else. Of course she has. One of the expected ladies dislikes a room that feels overheated. You glance at the fireplace. The same fireplace that must remain cheerful. So the room must look warmly welcoming without becoming particularly warm. Excellent. You instruct the maid to maintain a modest fire and ventilate the room before the callers arrive. Victorian domestic management sometimes resembles being asked to control the weather indoors. You step toward the window. Outside, clouds hang over London. A carriage rolls past. 2 pedestrians avoid a muddy patch. For a moment you imagine simply opening the front door and telling the afternoon guest that the curtains are slightly dull. The fire is moderately cheerful, and civilization will somehow endure. You do not. You turn back. The room is already improving. Flowers will come later. Tea will appear at the proper moment. The callers will sit comfortably and perhaps remark upon how pleasant everything looks. They will never know how many instructions move through the servants' passages to produce that pleasantness, and that is precisely the point. Then comes another knock. This time, the maid looks worried. "Ma'am, there's a carriage stopping outside." You glance at the clock. The callers are not due yet. Apparently Victorian visitors have discovered the one thing capable of defeating even excellent household organisation: arriving early. The carriage stops directly outside, for one hopeful second. You wonder whether it belongs to somebody visiting the neighbouring house. Then the front door knocker sounds. No such luck. The maid looks at you. You look at the drawing room. One curtain is still being brushed. The tea service is downstairs. The flowers have not arrived. A cloth lies folded across a chair, and the fireplace currently contains precisely the modest fire you arranged for guests who are supposed to appear later. "Take that cloth away." The maid moves. "Tell Mary to finish immediately." Another movement, and find out who has arrived. You remain calm because somebody has to. The front door is answered. Voices drift through the hall. A moment later, the message returns. It is not one of the expected ladies. It is a gentleman calling upon the master. Better, also worse. Better because he may not require the drawing room. Worse because nobody warned you about him. The visitor presents a card. Calling cards are an important part of respectable Victorian social life, allowing visitors to announce themselves and participate in a complicated etiquette of calls, acknowledgements, introductions, and social obligation. A card can be left even when the person being visited is unavailable. Simple enough. Naturally. Victorians managed to develop subtleties around even small pieces of pasteboard. Cards may communicate social relationships, and practices surrounding how they are delivered or received can carry meaning to people trained to notice such things. You are grateful that interpreting every nuance is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is ensuring the visitor does not encounter a maid carrying a dirty bucket. You send word along the service route. Keep the principal passage clear. The gentleman is shown into a suitable room while someone determines whether the master can receive him. You hear the faint murmur of polite conversation, then silence. The house holds its respectable expression. Behind that expression, servants are moving rapidly, the flowers arrive, of course they do, at the service entrance, at exactly the same moment. You descend to inspect them. The bundle is damp and fragrant, carrying a little burst of outdoor freshness into the smoky interior. Depending upon season and availability, flowers in London may come through markets, nurseries, street sellers, or local tradespeople. These are suitable. You approve them. A maid brings vessels. Stems are trimmed, leaves removed, water splashes onto the table for several minutes. Your hands smell green and fresh rather than of soap or coal. You arrange one group yourself. This is a task you enjoy. There is precision in it, but also freedom. A rose does not care about servant hierarchy. A stem does not require a character reference. You turn the arrangement slightly better. One small 19th century domestic fashion is the fascination with the symbolic language of flowers. Books assign meanings to particular blooms, allowing bouquets to supposedly communicate sentiments such as affection, innocence, remembrance, or jealousy. The system is far from perfectly consistent. Different books sometimes give different meanings to the same flower, so a carefully composed bouquet might declare eternal devotion according to one guide and something considerably less useful according to another. You decide not to send coded botanical messages to the callers. You simply make the flowers look attractive. Upstairs. The unexpected gentleman departs. You hear the front door close. Good. The household exhales. Then, barely 20 minutes later, the first expected carriage arrives. This time you are ready. Mostly. The drawing room has been restored to calm perfection. The curtains have somehow survived their crisis. The flowers stand in place. The fire glows without aggressively heating the room. Tea preparations wait below. A footman or maid answers the door according to the household arrangement. Names are announced. Fabric rustles. Polite voices float through the hall. Another carriage follows, then another. Your estimate of 6 guests becomes 8. 8 becomes 9. The cook receives the revised information with the expression of a woman whose cake is being personally tested by society. You inspect the refreshments. Slices must be neat. Nothing should look handled. The better china is arranged. Hot water is prepared. Milk is ready. Sugar sits in its proper bowl, no longer mysterious. The tray becomes heavy. Very heavy. This is another invisible fact of elegant entertaining. Silver, china, pots, cups, food, and hot water have weight. Someone carries that weight. A servant lifts the tray. You check it one final time. Everything is correct. Up it goes, then comes waiting. This may be the strangest part. After intense preparation, servants wait for bells. Conversation upstairs continues beyond your hearing. Guests discuss acquaintances, weather, marriages, politics, fashion, perhaps the ongoing Crimean War, which in 1855 occupies newspapers and conversations across Britain. Below stairs, you listen for metal. Ring. A servant moves. More hot water. Ring. Another request. Fresh cups. Someone has spilled tea. A cloth is needed. Nothing disastrous. You coordinate each response. The afternoon stretches onward. One guest remains longer than expected. Then another caller arrives without having been included in the original group. The arithmetic shifts again. A maid whispers that the sandwiches are nearly gone. You inspect what remains. Enough. If everyone suddenly develops restraint. Victorian callers are expected to observe social conventions about visiting. But conventions are not clocks. The length and formality of calls differ according to relationship and circumstance, and reconstructing precisely how faithfully families followed etiquette books is tricky. Printed advice gives us ideals. Real drawing rooms contain human beings who sometimes linger. Your kitchen feels the consequences. You ask for a small additional plate to be prepared. The cook protests quietly that she is also preparing dinner. You know, she knows you know. You both understand that the sandwiches must nevertheless appear. They do, upstairs. Nobody suspects crisis. That is success. Eventually. Chairs move. Farewells begin. The front door opens and closes. Carriages pull away one after another. Silence slowly returns. You enter the drawing room only after the final visitor has gone. The room looks tired, not dramatically. A cushion has shifted. One cup sits abandoned on a table. There are crumbs on a plate. A napkin has been folded into an inexplicable shape. The fire is fading. Flowers remain upright, innocent witnesses to everything. You walk through the aftermath. A maid begins collecting cups. Another straightens chairs. You inspect the carpet for spills. One small drop of tea. You point. It is treated immediately. The performance is over, and now the stage must be reset. You pick up a forgotten handkerchief. Fine fabric, probably belonging to one of the ladies. You set it safely aside, another object to remember, another small responsibility. Then a servant appears in the doorway. You expect a question about the handkerchief instead. She carries a message from the cook. Dinner plans have changed. The unexpected gentleman who called earlier has apparently been invited back. He will dine with the family. You close your eyes for perhaps half a second. Only half. The drawing room has barely recovered from afternoon visitors. The kitchen is already working. Table linen must be chosen, silver-checked. Courses coordinated, servants organised, timing reconsidered. One additional dinner guest should not transform the evening. And yet, somehow, it does. You hand the forgotten handkerchief to the maid for safekeeping. Then you turn toward the service stairs. Tea was merely a rehearsal. Dinner is going to be a campaign. You descend toward the kitchen with the uncomfortable knowledge that one extra dinner guest has somehow created work for half the household. The cook receives the news without surprise. This is worse than anger. She simply looks at you, then at the preparations already underway, as if inviting you to explain why respectable people cannot decide whom they are feeding before the food reaches the stove. One gentleman, you say. So far, she replies. Fair. Heat rolls from the range. The kitchen that felt pleasantly warm this morning has become almost tropical. Pots simmer. Metal lids tremble. A joint is being attended to. Vegetables wait in bowls. Steam clouds a nearby surface, and the air carries layers of butter, stock, roasting meat, onions, flour, smoke, and hot iron. Dinner upstairs may look serene. Dinner downstairs is weather. You begin recalculating. One more place at table, additional plate, additional glassware, more cutlery, another napkin. Perhaps a slight adjustment to portions. The cook believes there is enough food. You believe there is enough linen between you. Civilization may continue. You leave her territory and return to yours. The dining table must be inspected. A maid has already begun preparing the room. You enter and immediately see the cloth, fresh, smooth, white. You walk closer. This is not the stained tablecloth you rejected earlier. That one remains destined for further treatment. Good. Your hand passes lightly over the fabric. No creases worth correcting. The tablecloth matters because dinner is not merely consumption. In a prosperous Victorian household, it is presentation, sequence, etiquette, and evidence of domestic competence. By the middle of the 19th century, dining among the comfortable classes has developed increasingly elaborate conventions, depending upon wealth and fashion. Meals can involve multiple courses, specialized serving pieces, carefully arranged tables, and servants moving food between kitchen and dining room. The precise style is changing during your lifetime. The older practice, known as service à la française, with numerous dishes placed on the table together, is increasingly giving way in fashionable circles to service à la Russe, in which dishes arrive sequentially in courses and are often served with greater involvement from servants. Neither system makes your evening shorter. You inspect the silver. Candlelight reveals every imperfection. One spoon bears a faint mark. You hold it up. The maid responsible sees your face and takes it without waiting for instruction. Progress. You check the glasses, then the plates. The additional setting is arranged. Nothing should suggest that the guest was invited at the last minute. This is one of your household's recurring miracles. Improvisation must look planned. You step back. The table glows beneath candles. Their flames move slightly in the air. Glass catches the light. Silver reflects it. For a moment, you understand why so much labour goes into the effect. It is beautiful. Then you notice one fork is crooked. Beauty has ended. You straighten it. Downstairs. The first course approaches readiness. Messages begin moving between dining room and kitchen. Timing is everything. Food that waits too long cools. Servants who move too early disrupt the diners. Plates must disappear before the next stage arrives. The kitchen must somehow know what is happening in a room several corridors away. You become part messenger, part supervisor, part human clock. A footman passes. You remind him about the additional guest. He knows. You remind him anyway. Senior service is built partly upon the belief that anything worth remembering is worth mentioning twice. The family enters the dining room. You remain outside their social world. Doors close. The performance begins. From your position, dinner is experienced through fragments. A bell, footsteps, a door opening, plates returning, a whispered instruction, another course leaving the kitchen. You do not sit and admire the meal. You see its remains. One plate returns almost untouched. Another is completely cleared. Someone apparently dislikes one vegetable. Someone else has discovered an enthusiasm for sauce. The cook observes these details with professional interest. Compliments may eventually travel downstairs. Complaints travel faster. The first stage passes successfully. Then comes a small crisis. A serving dish is hotter than expected. A junior servant nearly grasps it without adequate protection. You stop her. Cloth. She obeys. A burned hand tonight would help nobody. The dish proceeds upstairs. No guest knows anything happened. Good. Victorian dining equipment contains enough specialised objects to furnish a small museum. Soup tureens, sauce boats, cruets, decanters, carving implements, vegetable dishes, warming arrangements, knife rests, salt cellars, and elaborate serving pieces can all appear according to the household and occasion. There are even specialised utensils designed for foods that most modern diners would attack perfectly happily with an ordinary fork. The 19th century has great faith in the idea that every food deserves its own piece of metal. You suspect drawers everywhere are suffering because of it. Another course returns. The kitchen grows hotter. A maid carries used dishes toward washing. Grease meets hot water. China knocks gently against china. You warn her to be careful with the better service. A broken plate is not merely inconvenient. It may belong to a matched set. Replacement can be difficult. One careless movement can therefore produce a conversation nobody wants. You return toward the dining room. Through the door you hear laughter. The family and their guests sound relaxed. That laughter tells you something important. They are not thinking about dinner. They are enjoying it. Therefore the dinner is succeeding. Good service disappears into experience. The guest never wonders whether the napkin was counted this morning. Nobody asks who polished the spoon. Nobody pauses to admire the fact that the soup arrived hot despite travelling through passages and doors. That invisibility is the achievement. Printed household guides often present formal dinners as if obedient servants move through flawless sequences. Yet surviving letters, memoirs, and account books hint at a less polished backstage reality. Exactly how closely an ordinary prosperous London household followed fashionable dining prescriptions cannot be settled neatly. Wealth, staff numbers, architecture, and personal preference all reshape the ritual. Your household does what works, mostly. Then the bell rings sharply. A servant emerges. More wine is wanted. That falls primarily within the butler's domain, but the request affects timing. So you wait. The next course pauses. Seconds pass. The cook becomes restless. You signal patience. The wine goes in. The empty dishes come out. Now. The next course moves. Timing restored. Nobody upstairs notices the interruption. You allow yourself one quiet breath. Dessert eventually approaches. The atmosphere downstairs begins to loosen, not relax. Never relax before the final plate returns, but loosen. Fruit, sweets, preserved items, perhaps cheese or other concluding dishes appear according to the family's habits. You inspect what leaves, then you wait. The guest remains. Conversation continues. Your feet ache. You become aware of them only because the most frantic part of the evening has passed. You have been standing for hours. A maid leans briefly against the wall. You pretend not to notice for 5 seconds. Then you look at her. She straightens. 5 seconds was generous. At last. Movement comes from the dining room, chairs scrape softly, the ladies withdraw. The gentlemen may remain for wine before joining them later. Following the social habits of the period, servants enter, the beautiful table begins to disappear, glasses are collected, plates removed, napkins gathered, silver counted, yes, counted, always counted. You take up one napkin, a dark stain marks the fabric. Wine. Wonderful. Tomorrow's laundry has received a gift from tonight's dinner. You place it aside. Around you, servants dismantle in minutes what took far longer to prepare. The unexpected guest has been fed. The household's reputation remains intact. The cook has survived. So have you. Then a maid approaches quietly. She says one of the upstairs servants has complained of feeling unwell. You look toward the corridor. Dinner may be ending. Your responsibilities are not. In a house where sickness can alter every routine by morning. The night has just changed direction. The maid waiting beside you lowers her voice. It is Ellen, ma'am. Ellen is one of the housemaids. You remember her from earlier, moving quickly through the upper rooms with a basin in her hands. Nothing about her seemed unusual then. Now she's sitting in the servants' quarters, with her head bowed and her face pale. You go to her. The noise of dinner recedes behind you. Used plates are still being carried away. Water splashes somewhere near the scullery. The kitchen remains warm and crowded, but this smaller room feels strangely quiet. Ellen looks up. I am quite well. Ma'am. Of course, nobody who announces this while looking thoroughly unwell is ever convincing. You touch the back of your fingers lightly to her forehead. Warm. Not alarmingly so. Still. Warm. How long? She hesitates. Since afternoon. You resist the temptation to ask why she said nothing. You already know. Servants work through discomfort because admitting illness can mean creating extra labour for everyone else. It may also produce anxiety about wages, reputation, or continued employment. A young servant far from her family has additional reasons to insist she can manage. You ask about her symptoms: headache, aching limbs, a little nausea, no serious cough, no obvious rash. You listen carefully. In 1855, illness carries a different weight from the one it carries in a modern home. Antibiotics do not exist. Germ theory has not yet become the accepted foundation of medical practice. Doctors possess useful knowledge and increasingly sophisticated clinical experience. But they also work within theories that future generations will discard. London has very recent reason to fear disease. Only the previous year, the terrible cholera outbreak centred around Broad Street had killed hundreds in Soho. Physician John Snow had linked cases to water from the Broad Street pump, strengthening the argument that contaminated water could spread cholera. Yet his interpretation is not immediately accepted by everyone. Many medical authorities still give considerable weight to miasma, the belief that disease can arise from foul or corrupted air. You do not stand here thinking about competing epidemiological theories. You think about Ellen. She needs rest. You send another maid for clean water. Then you arrange for Ellen to lie down. The problem immediately spreads through the household schedule. Who finishes her duties? Who covers tomorrow morning if she remains ill? Can another maid manage both sets of rooms? Do you need temporary help? Illness never affects only the sick person in domestic service. You pull a blanket over Ellen. She apologises. For what? For causing trouble? You look at her. Sleep. She obeys. There are moments when authority works best in one syllable. You step into the passage. The younger maid with the sore hands waits nearby. She offers to take Ellen's remaining work. You agree. But only what is necessary. There is no sense producing a second invalid through enthusiasm. You instruct her to collect Ellen's used cup separately. Perhaps you also order fresh air into the sleeping space. Cleanliness matters. So does ventilation. Victorian households employ a mixture of inherited domestic wisdom, fashionable medical advice, practical observation, and remedies passed between generations. Some are sensible: warmth, rest, fluids, light food. Others are less reassuring. Patent medicines flourish throughout the century, sold with confident promises against astonishing lists of complaints. Bottles can contain alcohol, opiates, powerful chemicals, or mixtures whose effectiveness owes more to advertising than medicine. The labels are often more optimistic than the patient's. You prefer caution if Ellen worsens. The mistress must be informed and a doctor may need to be called, for now. You ask the cook for something light. She suggests broth. Good. The kitchen produces broth with almost supernatural regularity whenever someone becomes ill. You return to Ellen later carrying a cup. Steam curls from its surface. She sits up slowly. The smell of warm stock fills the little room. You tell her to sip. She does. Her hands tremble slightly. You watch until you are satisfied she can manage. For servants, nursing often falls to other women within the household. A housekeeper may supervise care, while maids, cooks, family members, nurses, or hired attendants take different roles depending upon the seriousness of the illness and the family's resources. Your experience matters here. You have seen fevers before. You have seen influenza. You have watched servants recover from exhaustion after insisting they were perfectly healthy. You have also seen ordinary symptoms become serious. That memory keeps you from dismissing Ellen's condition. A curious domestic practice survives in some households through remedies that sound almost culinary. Mustard might appear in poultices or foot baths. Vinegar is used for various cleaning and health purposes. Gruel, barley water, broths, teas, and other gentle preparations occupy the border between food and medicine. The Victorian sick room can smell remarkably like a kitchen with ambitions. You leave Ellen resting. Upstairs, the family knows almost nothing. That may change. If the illness appears infectious, decisions must be made about isolation and exposure. The Victorians understand contagion in some circumstances, even while explanations of exactly how diseases spread remain unsettled. The neat modern story in which everyone simply believes in bad air until germ theory suddenly arrives is too simple. Medical thinking is varied and changing. Observations about contagion, sanitation, water, environment, and personal contact overlap uneasily. For you, theory matters less than habit. Keep the room clean, remove waste, provide fresh linen, do not allow unnecessary visitors, watch the patient. You return to your regular duties. The dinner aftermath has not politely disappeared because someone is sick. Silver must still be checked. Table linen collected, rooms restored, tomorrow's supplies considered. You move through these tasks with part of your attention always turned toward Ellen. An hour passes, then another. You check again. Her temperature seems no worse. She has finished some broth. Good. The younger maid has placed water nearby. Also good. You sit beside Ellen for a moment. Her eyes open. My mother used to put onions in the room when we were ill. You blink. Onions. She nods sleepily. Apparently her mother believed they absorbed sickness from the air. You decide the household can survive without transforming Ellen's room into a vegetable stall. Such beliefs are hardly unique to one family. 19th century domestic remedies can combine observation, tradition, superstition, and whatever happens to be available in the pantry. Some practices have plausible benefits. Others mostly ensure that future historians have interesting things to read. Ellen closes her eyes again. You lower the lamp. Outside the room, the corridor is quiet. Then the mistress sends for you. You climb upstairs. She has heard that a servant is unwell. Information travels quickly in houses. You explain the situation. Your mistress listens. She agrees that Ellen should rest and says a doctor may be called tomorrow if necessary. There is no complaint about interrupted work. You are grateful for that. Not every servant is so fortunate. You return below stairs with permission to reorganize the morning duties. The household is quieter now. Dinner has ended completely. Doors are closing, fires are being lowered. You make one final visit to Ellen. She sleeps. Her breathing is steady. You stand in the doorway for a few seconds. Tonight she's not simply a name on your work schedule. She's a young woman sleeping far from her family, trusting the household around her to care for her when she cannot work. Tomorrow, someone will have to perform her duties, and if Ellen remains ill for several days, you may need to decide whether the existing staff can manage or whether another servant must be found. That decision carries more weight than replacing a missing pair of hands. Hiring someone means judging a stranger's character, experience, honesty, and reputation. Dismissal can shape a life even more sharply. You lower the light and close the door softly. By morning, you may be counting more than linen, you may be measuring people. By morning, Ellen is still in bed. Her fever has not become alarming, which is a relief, but neither has it vanished politely overnight. She is weak, pale, and clearly incapable of carrying buckets or kneeling beside fireplaces. You rearrange the work, again. The upper housemaid takes several additional rooms, The younger maid handles part of the corridor. One less urgent task is postponed. Nobody is delighted. Nobody refuses. A household can absorb one missing servant for a short time, but the strain spreads quickly. Every duty belonging to the absent person lands on somebody else's shoulders. After breakfast, the mistress sends word, there is another matter. One of the lower servants has already given notice and will leave soon. You knew this was coming. Ellen's illness simply makes the approaching vacancy feel more inconvenient. A replacement must be found. And so your attention shifts from managing servants to acquiring one. Domestic service is among the largest sources of employment for women in Victorian Britain. Girls and women enter it from rural villages, industrial towns, London neighbourhoods, schools, workhouses, and families seeking respectable employment for daughters. The demand is enormous, so is the movement between positions. Servants leave because they marry, seek higher wages, dislike employers, quarrel with other staff, become ill, return home, or simply hope for better situations. Employers therefore live in a near-permanent state of needing servants. Servants live in a near-permanent state of needing characters. A character is essentially a reference from a previous employer. For a young woman seeking respectable domestic employment, it can be extraordinarily important. You may possess skill. You may work hard. You may know exactly how to clean a grate without covering yourself and 3 nearby walls in soot. But if your previous employer refuses to recommend you, your options shrink. You sit at your table with several names before you. One applicant has been recommended through another servant. That can be useful. Personal networks carry information that formal references sometimes conceal. Another has responded through an employment office or agency. Servants' registries operate in Victorian cities, matching employers with workers, although their reputations vary. Then there are advertisements. Newspapers carry columns filled with people seeking positions and households seeking servants. The language can be wonderfully compressed. Wanted. A respectable young woman. Must understand her duties. Good character indispensable. No followers. That last phrase deserves attention. Followers usually means male visitors, particularly sweethearts. Victorian households possess a remarkable ability to make romance sound like a minor infestation problem. You arrange to speak with a promising applicant. She arrives later in the day. Her name is Sarah. She is 20, at least. She says she is 20. You suspect 19, possibly 18. A servant's stated age is not always perfectly reliable, especially when employers prefer a particular level of maturity. Sarah stands before you in a plain dress. Her gloves are worn but clean. Good. Her boots have been brushed. Also good. You ask about her previous place. 18 months. Why did she leave the family moved? Where Bath? Why did she not go with them? Her mother is in London. Reasonable. You ask what duties she performed. Bedrooms, grates, stairs, cleaning sitting rooms, some waiting at table when required. You ask whether she can mend. A little. Whether she understands care of fine furniture. Yes. Whether she has worked with gas lighting. Yes. You continue. The questions may seem ordinary, but you are attempting to imagine this stranger inside the household. Will she work? Will she steal? Will she quarrel? Will she disappear after 2 weeks? Will she bring a sweetheart through the service entrance? Will she frighten the cat? The cat is hypothetical. The principle is not. Sarah presents a written reference. You read it. Her former mistress describes her as honest and willing. Willing? An interesting word. Not excellent. Not exceptionally competent. Willing. You look at Sarah again. Perhaps she was inexperienced when she began. You ask whether her former employer can be contacted. She says yes. That helps considerably. False references and fabricated characters are a recurring anxiety in 19th century discussions of domestic service. Advice books warn employers to verify them rather than trusting paper alone. Some servants undoubtedly exaggerate experience, while employers themselves can provide unfair, vague, or vindictive references. A reference system sounds wonderfully objective until humans begin writing the references. You ask Sarah about wages. She names an amount, reasonable. You explain the expected duties. She listens carefully. You mention early rising, no reaction. You mention shared sleeping arrangements, still no reaction. You mention the household's rules concerning visitors, a very slight reaction. Ah! You ask whether she has a follower. No, ma'am. The answer arrives quickly. Perhaps true, perhaps expertly rehearsed. You do not press. There is a larger uncertainty beneath interviews like this. Domestic manuals often imply that good character can be identified through careful questioning, neat clothing, modest behaviour, and respectable references. Actual human reliability is not so conveniently visible. A nervous applicant may become an excellent servant. A polished one may prove disastrous. You must judge anyway. That is your job. You tell Sarah no decision will be made until her reference is checked. She thanks you. Before leaving, she glances around your room, not greedily, curiously. Perhaps she's imagining herself working here. You remember doing the same thing years ago. Every new place begins with uncertainty. Different stairs, different bells, different personalities, different rules about meals, visitors, candles, Sundays, clothing, and time away. A servant does not merely change employers, she changes homes. Sarah leaves. You make notes. Then comes the less pleasant side of your authority. The servant who has given notice enters. Her name is Jane. She has worked in the house for nearly 2 years. She is leaving because she hopes for a position with slightly higher wages. You cannot blame her. Still, you must discuss her character. Jane stands quietly. You tell her you will say she is capable, honest, and generally reliable. Her shoulders relax. Then you add that she must improve her punctuality. She nods. You have spoken to her about it before. Frequently. Jane appears to believe clocks are advisory. You will not destroy her prospects over occasional lateness, nor will you lie. That balance matters. A harsh character can follow a servant from one household to another. Employment legislation and customary practice surrounding references evolve across the century. But informal power remains enormous. Reputation is currency. For women with limited savings, losing access to respectable employment can be frightening. You understand that. Perhaps it is why you choose your words carefully. Jane thanks you. At the door, she pauses. Will you miss me? Ma'am? You look at her. This is not a question anticipated by household manuals. Your punctuality? No. She laughs. Then you smile. Some other things, perhaps. She leaves happier. You return to Sarah's reference and outside your room. The household continues. A bell rings. Someone carries coal. Ellen coughs faintly from her room. You look down at the written character in your hands. Soon one woman will leave. Another may enter. The household will absorb the change and appear exactly the same upstairs. But you know better. Every servant brings habits, loyalties, weaknesses, friendships, and secrets. And sometimes, despite references and interviews and careful supervision, things disappear. Not sugar sacrificed to custard. Not candles consumed by love letters. Something valuable. Something nobody can explain. When that happens, the comfortable world below stairs can become a place of whispers, suspicion, and locked doors. You fold Sarah's reference carefully, then you place it beside your keys. The first sign of trouble is remarkably small. A spoon. Not one of the best silver pieces from last night's dinner. Nothing so dramatic. This is an ordinary household spoon. Useful enough to be noticed, but hardly valuable enough to inspire a criminal empire beneath the stairs. Still, it should be there. You count again. Then once more. The number refuses to improve. You stand beside the open cupboard while a maid waits behind you. Where were these last used? She thinks. Yesterday afternoon. Some went upstairs with tea. Others were used at breakfast. All should have returned. You ask whether the washing has been checked. Yes. The trays. Yes. The kitchen. Probably. Probably. The maid disappears. You remain beside the cupboard. Yesterday's sugar mystery has made you cautious about conclusions. Sugar vanished into custard. A candle vanished into romance. The pillowcase disappeared between a bedstead and wall. Perhaps the spoon has simply discovered an equally innocent adventure. You hope so. Silver and plated goods require close supervision in prosperous households. Even modest pieces represent money, while the finest objects may form part of a family's treasured possessions. Senior servants therefore count, store, polish, and secure them carefully. Your keys suddenly feel heavier. The maid returns. No spoon. You send another servant to inspect the dining room, then the pantry, then beneath furniture. It sounds ridiculous until you remember how easily small objects travel. A teaspoon may remain on a tray. A maid may carry one away with a cup. Something can fall into a slop bucket or become wrapped accidentally in linen. There is an old household fear of spoons disappearing into kitchen waste, and the concern is not entirely absurd. Servants sorting scraps and ashes sometimes have to watch for cutlery that has followed food where no respectable spoon wishes to go. You briefly imagine composing an advertisement. Missing one spoon. Last seen performing respectable duties. Reward the preservation of everyone's patience. No, you continue searching. By noon. The spoon has become public knowledge below stairs. This is unfortunate. Information travels through a household with impressive speed. The cook knows. The housemaids know. The kitchen maid knows. Someone probably knows that you know that everyone knows, and with knowledge comes speculation. Perhaps Jane took it. Jane is leaving soon. Convenient. Perhaps the new delivery boy slipped it into his pocket. Perhaps one of yesterday's callers carried it away accidentally. Perhaps the footman knows more than he says. You stop the rumours as soon as they reach you. No accusations without reason. The servants fall quiet. You mean it. A reputation can be damaged by a whisper long before evidence appears. The danger is particularly sharp for servants. Honesty is one of the qualities employers value most, and suspicion of theft can poison a character reference even without formal prosecution. A servant accused of stealing from an employer faces consequences far beyond dismissal. Police may become involved, magistrates may hear the case, a conviction can destroy future prospects. You will not start such a chain because a teaspoon has developed wanderlust. Still, vigilance is expected. You check the cupboard locks. No damage. You ask who had access. Several people. Indirectly. That is the problem. Victorian households may appear strictly controlled, but servants constantly handle valuable property. Jewellery lies in bedrooms. Money may be left in clothing. Silver passes through hands. Food stores, wine, coal, candles, and linen all possess resale value or practical usefulness. Trust is unavoidable. So is suspicion. The two live together uneasily. Later, you find Jane polishing furniture. She knows why you have come. You can see it immediately. I didn't take it, Mum. You had not asked. I know. She looks surprised. You correct yourself. I have no reason to think you did. Better. You ask whether she remembers seeing the spoon. She thinks carefully. Yesterday. One of the tea trays returned with a cup still containing a little tea. She carried the tray toward the scullery. Who washed it? The kitchen maid. Another thread. You find the kitchen maid. She turns pale before you finish asking. That reaction would look wonderfully suspicious in a melodrama. Real life is less cooperative. She is pale because she fears being blamed. She remembers washing several spoons. How many she does not know. Where did she put them with the others? Did she drop one? No. Probably not. There is that word again. Probably. You tell her to think. She does. Then her face changes. Yesterday, a spoon fell into the water. She reached for it. Another servant called her. She forgot. You both look toward the washing area. The water is long gone, but the tub and nearby drain can be inspected. Nothing? Then you examine a rag basket. Nothing. A waste container. Nothing. The kitchen maid looks close to tears. You tell her to continue working. By afternoon, the spoon remains missing, and now something else happens. A maid reports seeing a man near the service entrance the previous evening. A man. Immediately. Several faces turn toward the young housemaid with the admirer. She flushes. You feel irritation rise, not at her, at the speed with which coincidence becomes guilt. You ask for details. The man was not her admirer. Apparently he was asking for directions. He never entered. Another dramatic theory collapses. Good. Servants' followers receive so much attention in household rules, partly because employers worry about strangers gaining access through back entrances. A sweetheart visiting the kitchen is not merely a moral concern. He is also an unknown person entering spaces where food, clothing, silver, and household information are accessible. This helps explain rules that can otherwise look absurdly intrusive. It does not make them pleasant. You check the service door procedures anyway. By evening, you're tired of the spoon. You would happily purchase another yourself if doing so did not leave the mystery unresolved. Then the upper housemaid enters your room. She's holding something. The spoon. You stare at it. She explains. It was found in a bedroom. A child of the family had apparently carried it upstairs with a small dish and left it inside a drawer while playing. You take the spoon for several seconds. You say nothing. The upper housemaid appears to be fighting a smile. You are too, all day. Suspicion moved through the servants' quarters. The kitchen maid nearly cried. Jane feared her character might be questioned. A harmless stranger became a possible thief, and the criminal mastermind was a child with a drawer. You laugh, quietly, but genuinely. The tension breaks. You immediately tell the servants the spoon has been found. You also make it clear that nobody is to tease the kitchen maid. This instruction will probably reduce the teasing by perhaps 40%. Human nature remains outside your jurisdiction. The episode leaves you thoughtful. Stories of servant dishonesty fill newspapers, court records, advice literature, and employers' warnings. Yet those sources naturally preserve conflict more readily than uneventful trust. A household where nothing is stolen produces no dramatic court report. A servant who works honestly for 20 years may leave little documentary trace beyond census entries and wages in an account book. So the surviving picture can tilt toward trouble. Your own day demonstrates why caution matters. The spoon rests safely in your palm, small, cold, entirely innocent. You return it to its proper place and lock the cupboard. Click, order restored. Yet you know another kind of scrutiny never disappears so easily, even when nothing is missing. Your own conduct is being measured. How you dress, where you go, whom you meet, how you speak, whether you drink, whether you attend church, whether you appear respectable enough to supervise everyone else's respectability. You hang the keys at your waist again. Managing property is only part of your position. You must also manage the appearance of yourself. The spoon is back where it belongs, but its brief disappearance leaves an uncomfortable thought behind. You spend your days judging whether other people appear trustworthy. Other people are doing exactly the same to you. Your authority depends upon more than competence. You may count every sheet correctly, manage 10 unexpected callers, calm an angry cook, and discover a missing spoon inside a child's drawer. But none of that entirely protects you if your own reputation begins to slip. Respectability follows you everywhere. It follows you into the street. It follows you to church. It follows you into conversation. It even follows you into your wardrobe. This morning, standing before the small mirror in your room, you inspect your appearance with practiced speed. Your dress is sober. Your cap is clean. Your collar sits correctly. Nothing is extravagant. Nothing is careless. As a senior servant, you need to look respectable enough to command junior staff without appearing to imitate the women upstairs. That boundary can be surprisingly delicate. Victorian employers sometimes object to servants dressing too fashionably, particularly when clothing seems to blur visible distinctions between classes. The complaint appears repeatedly in 19th century discussions of service. Fashion, apparently, is dangerous when it climbs the back stairs. You smooth one cuff. You own better clothing for your time away from the house, but even then caution matters. A servant who appears excessively decorated may invite gossip about where the money came from. A servant who looks shabby may be judged careless. The ideal sits somewhere in the narrow territory between the two. Convenient. You leave your room. Today you have a small amount of personal business to conduct later. Assuming the household remains quiet, assuming that word carries considerable courage. Before then, there is work. Ellen is improving. Her fever has eased. Though you insist she remain in bed, she protests. You ignore her. A person who can barely sit upright does not become useful merely because she feels guilty. You inspect the morning tasks, issue supplies, check the linen returned from washing, and answer several questions. By late afternoon, the household reaches one of its rare calm periods. You receive permission to go out. Permission. You are an adult woman entrusted with valuable keys and responsibility for multiple servants. Yet your freedom remains connected to employment. Living in service means living inside someone else's timetable. You change clothes. The keys remain behind. Without them, your waist feels strangely light. You put on your bonnet and gloves. The woman in the mirror is still unmistakably respectable, but she looks slightly less like the housekeeper. You almost feel anonymous. Then you descend. A maid sees you near the service door. Going out, ma'am. For a short while, she nods. Half the servants will probably know precisely how long you were absent. Below stairs has its own surveillance system. You step outside. The air meets you with smoke, dampness, horse smells, and the complicated scent of London. Freedom, apparently, smells strongly of manure. You walk. Even here, behaviour matters. A respectable woman does not wander anywhere she pleases without consequence. Neighbourhood, hour, companions, and manner can all affect how others interpret her presence. You're careful because your reputation belongs partly to the household employing you. Employers may dismiss servants for conduct considered immoral or embarrassing. Drunkenness, dishonesty, sexual scandal, persistent insolence, and improper visitors are common anxieties. For women, standards are especially unforgiving. A male servant's indiscretion may be condemned. A woman's can become defining. You pass shop windows, for a moment. A ribbon catches your attention, deep green, very pretty. You stop. You imagine it on your better bonnet. Then you imagine the younger maids noticing it. Then the cook. Then perhaps the mistress. A ribbon has somehow become a committee meeting. You buy nothing. There is gentle absurdity in how intensely clothing could be read for moral meaning. Advice directed at servants often praises neatness, modesty, cleanliness, and restraint as though a tidy collar might provide visible evidence of an orderly soul. If virtue could truly be established through laundry, your linen cupboard would qualify for sainthood. You continue. You may be heading to visit a friend, perhaps another woman in service. She works several streets away. You meet briefly in a respectable setting and exchange news. Her household has lost another kitchen maid. Why marriage? You smile. Your friend does not. Apparently the girl gave very little warning. You mention your own departing servant and the interview with Sarah. Then come stories. A butler dismissed for drinking. A maid who has gone home to care for her mother. A cook offered higher wages elsewhere. A housekeeper rumoured to be marrying a widowed tradesman. You listen carefully to that one. Marriage can end a woman's career in domestic service, especially in live-in positions where employers prefer unmarried servants. Yet for a housekeeper who has saved money, marriage to a respectable tradesman or widower may offer another path into security. Would you want it? The question sits quietly. You have spent years building authority. Marriage might provide companionship. It might also replace paid responsibility with unpaid responsibility. Victorian romance occasionally has an accounting department. Your friend asks whether you have ever considered leaving service. You give the safest answer. Sometimes, she laughs. Everyone in service has probably said that. Your meeting ends. You walk back before the light fades too far. The surviving record gives no single portrait of how tightly senior servants' private lives were controlled. Some long-serving housekeepers appear to have enjoyed considerable trust. Visitors, savings, and independence. Elsewhere, household rules were severe. Age, status, location, personality, and the employer's expectations could change everything. Your own freedom is neither complete nor absent. It exists within boundaries. You return through the service entrance at the proper time. Nobody comments. This somehow feels more suspicious than if they had. You change back into your working clothes. The cap returns, then the keys. Their familiar weight settles against your dress. Housekeeper again. A younger maid approaches with a question about Sunday. May she attend a different church with her sister? You consider the request. Sunday is supposed to offer spiritual rest. Though domestic work never disappears completely, meals still happen, fires still burn, people still require things. You grant permission provided duties are covered. She thanks you. Religion forms part of respectable household identity, and servants may be expected to attend worship when possible. But even here, practice varies. Some employers encourage regular attendance sincerely. Others seem mainly concerned that servants be seen behaving properly. The difference between morality and the appearance of morality can become very thin. Evening settles. You sit briefly in your room. Your better bonnet rests nearby. You think of the green ribbon. Perhaps next time. There is no law against a housekeeper owning something pretty. Probably. A bell rings. You stand. Your small piece of personal freedom is finished. Tomorrow you will count, supervise, correct, remember, and quietly carry the household's expectations again. Yet beyond these walls lies the city you just walked through. Markets, shops, churches, omnibuses, crowds, noise, thousands of lives that have nothing to do with whether the drawing room curtains look dull. And on the rare occasions when the service door opens for you, London reminds you that your entire world is larger than this house. The service door closes behind you on another afternoon, and London immediately swallows the quiet of the house. A cart rattles past. Iron wheels strike uneven stones with a hard, repeating clatter, Horses breathe clouds into the cool air, boots scrape pavement somewhere nearby. A street seller calls above the traffic, stretching ordinary words into a musical cry designed to travel farther than conversation. You adjust your bonnet and join the movement. Time outside is precious precisely because you possess so little of it. Inside the household, almost every hour belongs to someone else's needs. Here, even if only briefly, you choose which direction your feet take. You walk toward a busier street. London in 1855 is enormous, crowded, wealthy, poor, fashionable, filthy, innovative, and exhausting. Often within the same few hundred yards, smoke hangs over rooftops, chimneys rise everywhere, gas lamps wait for evening. Shop windows display fabrics, hats, books, household goods, food, and objects that seem designed to persuade respectable people that their lives are incomplete without purchasing something. You understand the technique. Your household cupboards contain evidence. The population of London has expanded dramatically during the first half of the 19th century, exceeding 2 million by the 1850s. People arrive from across Britain and Ireland, while trade, government, finance, manufacturing, domestic service, construction, transport, and countless small occupations pull workers into the capital. You feel that scale in the pavement. People everywhere. A clerk passes quickly. 2 women examine fabric outside a shop. A porter carries a load that makes your shoulders ache merely from watching him. A servant girl walks in the opposite direction carrying a parcel. You recognize her occupation almost instantly. Perhaps she recognizes yours. Servants learn to identify one another. Clothing, manner, errands. That particular expression of someone who has been sent to purchase one thing and knows disaster awaits if she returns with the wrong version. You continue. An omnibus approaches. The vehicle is horse-drawn, one of the growing network carrying Londoners along established routes. Omnibuses have been operating in the capital since 1829, giving people who can afford the fare another way to cross a city becoming increasingly difficult to navigate entirely on foot. They are not luxurious. They can be crowded. They can be uncomfortable. But they represent mobility. You watch passengers climb aboard. Perhaps you use one occasionally. Today you walk. The pavement is busy enough that you must weave between people. Then your boot nearly lands in something produced by a horse. You adjust course, elegantly. Nobody applauds. London contains hundreds of thousands of horses over the broader Victorian period, powering private carriages, cabs, omnibuses, delivery vehicles, and commercial transport. Their contribution to urban movement is immense. So is their contribution to the street surface. A romantic carriage ride looks rather different when viewed by the person responsible for cleaning the entrance carpet afterward. You pass a crossing sweeper for a small payment. Sweepers clear paths through muddy and dirty streets so pedestrians can cross without destroying shoes and hems. Some are children, others are elderly or disabled people trying to earn coins from passing traffic. You step across the cleared path. The contrast catches you. A carriage passes carrying people who barely glance outside. A child sweeps what the horses leave behind. London's social ladder is visible at street level. Your own position sits somewhere complicated upon it. You are not wealthy. You own little compared with your employers, yet you have regular wages, food, lodging, and a respected senior position, compared with a woman surviving through irregular street work. Your security can look substantial. Compared with the mistress whose rooms you manage, it looks modest. Both things are true, farther along. You encounter street vendors. Their cries form part of London's soundscape. Flowers, fruit, fish, matches, small household items, seasonal goods, anything capable of being carried, pushed, balanced, or displayed seems capable of becoming a street business. Some cries have existed for generations. Guidebooks and illustrated collections preserve them because visitors find them characteristic of London. The vendors themselves are presumably less interested in being picturesque than in selling enough to eat. You pause near a flower cellar. A small bunch catches your eye. Nothing grand. You think of your room. A few flowers might brighten the table. Then you remember the green ribbon you resisted yesterday. Apparently personal spending has become rebellious. You buy the flowers. A tiny extravagance. The seller wraps the stems. You carry them carefully. Nearby, a shop advertises patent medicine with claims broad enough to suggest the contents can cure almost everything except poor judgment. Another window displays mourning goods. Another offers tea. Another sells books. Printed advertisements are everywhere, competing for attention with signs, handbills, posters, newspapers, and human voices. You pass a news seller. Headlines refer to the war in Crimea. The conflict is distant geographically but close psychologically. Reports of military suffering, administrative failures, nursing reforms, and battlefield conditions have reached British readers with unusual immediacy. Telegraphy and war correspondence are changing how quickly news can travel. Florence Nightingale's work in the military hospitals has already made her increasingly famous. Perhaps servants discuss her downstairs. Women certainly do. A woman exercising authority within institutions built by men is interesting to someone who spends her own days exercising authority within a house owned by somebody else. You continue toward a market. Smells arrive in layers: fish, vegetables, fruit, meat, wet straw, smoke, animals, human bodies, coffee, bread, something fried, something you decide not to identify. London assaults the nose democratically. One surviving description may emphasize glittering shops and fashionable crowds, another crushing poverty and filth. Neither alone gives you the city. The evidence left by reformers, journalists, novelists, officials, visitors, and ordinary residents reflects different Londons existing simultaneously. Your London changes from street to street. A broad road feels prosperous. Turn a corner and buildings narrow. Turn again and an elegant square appears. You never see all of it. Nobody does. Your errands take you toward a church. The bells sound above the traffic. For a moment, the noise around you seems to soften. You stop. Not for long. Your free time has limits. You begin the walk back. The flowers remain in your hand as afternoon fades. Gas workers and lamplighters will help transform the streets. Lamps appear one after another. Small islands of controlled flame against soot-darkened buildings. London at night never becomes truly silent. Neither does your household. You approach the familiar street, the familiar door, the familiar boundary between your time and theirs, before entering. You look once behind you. An omnibus passes. A vendor calls. Someone laughs. Hooves strike stone. The city continues without you. Then you open the service door. Warmth meets your face. So does the smell of coal. A maid appears almost immediately. "There you are, ma'am." Those 4 words contain the end of freedom. You hand her one parcel and keep the flowers. Nothing urgent has happened. Ellen is improving. The mistress has asked 1 question. The cook has asked 3. Normal life. You return to your room and place the little flowers in water. They look almost absurdly bright against the practical surroundings. Soon evening duties pull you back into corridors, cupboards, fires, doors, and bells. But for a few seconds you stand beside the flowers and listen to London muffled beyond the wall. Then you hear the first lock being checked for the night. Your day is turning inward again. The city can remain awake. Your responsibility now is to make sure the house eventually sleeps. The house does not fall asleep all at once. It retreats gradually. One room quietens, then another. A door closes upstairs. Footsteps cross a corridor and disappear, somewhere in the servants' quarters. A tired maid suppresses a yawn while carrying the final collection of cups toward the scullery. You stand in the passage listening. The flowers you bought earlier are waiting in your room, but you are not finished yet. Night brings its own list: fires, candles, windows, doors, valuables, tomorrow's supplies, and tonight. Ellen. You visit her first. She's awake when you enter, sitting higher against the pillows than she managed yesterday. Better. Much better. There is colour in her face. "How are you?" "Nearly well, ma'am." Nearly well is suspiciously ambitious, but you accept the improvement. You tell her she may rise tomorrow if she feels strong enough. Though she will not immediately resume every duty, she begins protesting. You give her a look. The protest dies peacefully. A cup sits beside the bed. You check that she has water, lower the lamp slightly, and leave her to sleep. Then you begin your circuit. The drawing room comes first. It looks different at night. During daylight it belongs to callers, conversation, dresses, tea trays, and carefully arranged comfort. Now the furniture stands quietly in the low light. You inspect the fire. It has burned down. Depending upon the household's habits and season, fires may be allowed to die overnight in many rooms rather than wasting coal. Maintaining warmth throughout a large house is expensive, and bedrooms can become distinctly cold by morning. You make sure the grate is safe. A candle remains on a side table. Too much wick. You extinguish it. A thin thread of smoke rises. The smell is sharp and familiar. One less flame, one less possibility of trouble. Fire is never an abstract danger in a house filled with wood. Curtains, carpets, bedding, paper, furniture, coal fires, candles, and perhaps gas. An overturned candle or neglected grate can turn domestic comfort into catastrophe remarkably quickly. So you check, then check again. The dining room is next. The table has been cleared. Silver is no longer scattered across it. The valuable pieces have returned to secure storage under the appropriate senior servant's care. You run your eye over the room. Nothing unusual. The forgotten handkerchief from yesterday has already been identified and returned to its owner. The criminal spoon is safely imprisoned in its drawer. For once, every small object seems determined to behave. You continue in the corridor. A housemaid carries a candlestick. Her face is exhausted. Finished. Almost, ma'am. Almost. The word of the evening. You remind her about one window upstairs. She has already checked it. Good. You send her to bed when her remaining task is complete. She thanks you with more sincerity than people usually show when receiving instructions. Sleep is a valuable currency below stairs. You reach the service entrance. The door is shut. You test it. Locked. Bolts and locks matter because a Victorian urban household must protect itself after dark. The front entrance receives similar attention, usually under the butler's or another senior servant's responsibility in a large establishment. While your own concern extends particularly through the domestic areas, windows must be secured. Service doors cannot remain casually open. Deliveries are finished, visitors are gone. The boundary closes. You turn the key, metal moves heavily inside the lock. There is satisfaction in that sound. The world is outside, the household is inside, at least until morning. You descend toward the stores. Yes, even now. You check tomorrow's requirements. Tea is sufficient, sugar is sufficient, soap has been replenished, candles remain adequate. You do not need to count every item tonight, but experience tells you that mornings become easier when problems are noticed the evening before. A good housekeeper is partly someone who prevents tomorrow from becoming unnecessarily irritating. You close the cupboard, lock, key, the familiar sequence near the kitchen. The range is being settled for the night. Some cooking ranges require careful management so that heat can be maintained or restored efficiently in the morning. Exactly how a particular household handles its kitchen, fire depends upon equipment, season, fuel, and local routine. The cook has her own preferences. You do not interfere, you value peace. The scullery maid finishes washing the last items. Water glistens on her forearms. She looks half asleep. You inspect the dishes quickly, then you dismiss her. She disappears with impressive speed. You almost admire it. Servants can move very slowly when asked to perform an unpleasant task and very quickly when released to bed. A universal physical law. You walk upstairs once more. The gas, where fitted, requires attention too. By the 1850s, domestic gas lighting has spread among wealthier London households. But adoption is uneven. Some families embrace it enthusiastically, others distrust its smell, expense, pipes, or perceived dangers and continue relying heavily on candles and lamps. A house can therefore contain several generations of lighting technology at once. Flame in a grate, flame in a candle, flame behind glass, gas burning from a fixture. Modernity arrives gradually, room by room. You check what belongs to your responsibility. Everything appears safe. The family has retired. The servants follow. The house changes again, without constant footsteps. You notice quieter sounds. Wood contracts. A pipe makes a faint noise. Wind touches a window, somewhere outside. A carriage continues along the street. London refuses bedtime. You pause beside an upper window. Gas lamps glow beyond the glass. The street looks softer from here, less muddy, less crowded. Distance improves many things. You think of the servants already asleep. Some share rooms, some occupy cramped spaces in attics or lower parts of the house. Senior servants may enjoy more privacy, but sleeping arrangements vary enormously according to architecture and household wealth. Floor plans show what designers intended. Memoirs sometimes reveal people squeezed wherever space permitted. Real houses rarely behave as neatly as diagrams. You descend again. One final check. Ellen is sleeping. Good. The kitchen is quiet. Good. Doors secure. Good. Stores locked. Good. You enter your own room. At last. The flowers stand in their little vessel. You had almost forgotten them. You remove your keys. The sudden absence of weight is wonderful. You place them beside the bed. Your cap comes off. Pins follow. You sit. Your feet ache with a deep, dull persistence that has been waiting all day for you to notice. Now you notice. There is no dramatic complaint, just tiredness, the kind that settles into shoulders, back, hands, and legs. You look around your room. This space is both private and not quite private. It belongs to you while you remain employed here. If you leave, someone else may occupy it. Another housekeeper, another ring of keys, another woman counting sheets and candles and teaspoons. That thought stays with you. Your position feels permanent because the household depends upon you. But service is never entirely secure. Employers die, families move, money disappears, houses are sold, servants marry, bodies age, circumstances change. You lift one flower gently and breathe its faint scent. Tomorrow morning, the keys will return to your waist, the cupboards will open, the bells will begin, but tonight, for these few quiet minutes, you are not supervising anyone. You're simply a woman sitting beside a small bunch of flowers in London in 1855, wondering how many more years you will live by other people's clocks, and what might happen when you finally decide to stop. You remain beside the little vase for another moment, your keys resting on the table rather than against your waist, without them. The room seems unusually still. Tomorrow they will become ordinary again. You will barely notice their weight while moving through passages and opening cupboards. Tonight, however, they look almost symbolic. A ring of metal, a career, years of responsibility reduced to something that fits inside one hand. You think about how you arrived here. Perhaps your first position was nothing like this one. You may have entered service as a frightened young housemaid, carrying a small box containing your clothing and very little else. You learned how employers liked fires prepared, how furniture should be cleaned, how beds were aired, how bells must be answered, and how quickly mistakes could become memorable. Then came experience, better positions, more responsibility, eventually, perhaps, the keys. Domestic service offers one of the more important forms of paid employment available to Victorian women. An advancement within larger households is possible. A capable maid might rise to upper housemaid, then eventually secure a senior position elsewhere. The path is never guaranteed, but experience and a strong character can increase wages and prospects. You have climbed that quiet ladder. Nobody held a ceremony. There was no speech. One day, someone simply trusted you with more. Now junior servants watch your expression when something goes wrong. You remember the missing spoon and smile. Authority sometimes means spending an entire day investigating cutlery stolen by a child. Still, your position brings advantages. You receive wages. You have food and lodging. You may save money, if careful. You can accumulate a modest sum over years. Perhaps you keep savings in a bank or savings institution. Perhaps some remain securely stored elsewhere. The expansion of savings banks during the 19th century gives working people additional opportunities to deposit relatively small amounts. You know roughly what you possess, not enough to become idle, enough to imagine choices. That matters. You could remain in service for years. Many housekeepers do. Older female servants sometimes become deeply attached to particular families, remaining through marriages, births, deaths, moves, and changes in fortune. Long service can create relationships difficult to describe, using the simple language of employer and employee. Affection may be genuine. So may inequality. You can care about a family without belonging to it. That is perhaps one of the strangest truths of your position. You know their habits. You know their rooms. You may remember their children growing. You protect their possessions. You keep their secrets. Yet when your service ends, the house remains theirs. You leave. What happens then? Marriage is one possibility. The widowed tradesman your friend mentioned returns to your thoughts. You almost laugh at yourself. You have never met the man. Already your imagination has given him a shop, a respectable coat, and an irritating habit of leaving papers on the table. Perhaps marriage would be comfortable. Perhaps it would not. For a woman accustomed to managing her own wages and exercising authority, marriage involves complicated trade-offs. Under the legal framework of coverture, a married woman's independent legal and property position is severely restricted, though specific circumstances, trusts, settlements, and later reforms complicate the picture. In 1855, those later reforms are still ahead. You do not use the word coverture while sitting beside your flowers. You simply understand that marriage changes things. Money, work, residence, independence, respectability, perhaps children, perhaps security, perhaps dependence of another kind. Remaining unmarried has costs too. Age does not stop. Domestic labour is physical. Stairs that feel ordinary at 40 may feel less friendly at 60. Coal scuttles do not become lighter because you have served faithfully. You look at your hands, they're experienced hands, not delicate, not ruined, capable. You wonder what they will look like in 20 years. The evidence left behind by women like you rarely answers such private questions. Census returns may capture a housekeeper at 10-year intervals. Account books may preserve wages. Wills sometimes reveal savings or affectionate gifts. Memoirs occasionally open a window into long service, but most evenings vanish. Nobody records the moment a housekeeper sits alone wondering whether she should marry, retire, change positions, or remain exactly where she is. Silence in the archive does not mean silence in the room. You are thinking. Perhaps thousands of women are thinking similar thoughts tonight, across London. Servants are settling into beds beneath roofs belonging to employers. Some are homesick, some are laughing, some are crying quietly, some are planning to leave, some are counting savings. Some are reading forbidden letters by candles they were told not to waste. You smile again. That particular crime seems almost charming now. Your thoughts return to tomorrow. Ellen may be strong enough to rise. Sarah's reference must still be considered. Jane will soon leave. The linen requires attention. More soap may eventually be needed. The stained tablecloth waits. Nothing dramatic. That is precisely the point. Your life is made mostly from repetition. Keys, cupboards, lists, meals, dust, bells, people. And beneath those ordinary things lies enormous responsibility. A household does not maintain itself. The polished rooms upstairs depend upon hands rarely celebrated in family portraits. The clean bed depends upon someone carrying water. The dinner depends upon heat and timing. The welcoming fire depends upon coal. The respectable servant staff depends upon supervision. Even silence requires work. You think of all the women whose labour disappears into that silence. The maid kneeling at a grate, the laundry worker bending over steaming water, the kitchen maid scrubbing pans, the cook standing before unbearable heat, and you, walking between them with keys at your waist. A wonderfully persistent Victorian idea portrays the well-managed household as almost naturally harmonious, as though servants, employers, duties, and hierarchy settle gracefully into place. Actual lives resist that neatness. Some servants remembered kindness and stability. Others remembered exploitation, exhaustion, loneliness, or humiliation. Many probably experienced several of those things at once. Your own life cannot be reduced to misery, nor can it be turned into cosy nostalgia. There are flowers, there are aching feet, there is pride, there is dependence, there is laughter over a spoon, there are locked cupboards, there is the satisfaction of competence, and there is always another bell. You prepare for bed. Outside. London murmurs beyond the window. The city sounds distant now. Your candle flame moves gently. You think about the morning before you extinguish it. The keys will be waiting, but they can wait a little longer. You lie down. The blankets settle over you. Your shoulders slowly release the tension of the day. The house is safe. The doors are locked. The fires are low. Ellen sleeps more comfortably. The servants have gone quiet. Upstairs. The family rests without thinking about soap, sugar, linen, candles, stains, schedules, or spoons. You have thought about all of them. So now your work can soften at the edges. The corridors fade into darkness. The kitchen cools. The last faint smell of coal drifts through the sleeping house. Outside. Carriage wheels grow less frequent. You do not need to count anything now, not sheets, not candles, not hours. Tomorrow will arrive whether you supervise it or not. So allow the keys to remain on the table. Allow the cupboards to stay closed. Allow every bell to be silent. And somewhere inside this enormous smoky city, behind one respectable London door, let the housekeeper finally become invisible, not because she is working perfectly, but because she is resting. For a few quiet hours, the household can ask nothing of you. Your breathing slows, the flowers beside you release almost no scent now, only the faintest suggestion of the street outside and the small freedom you carried home. The candle waits, then you extinguish it. Darkness settles gently across the room, and the house sleeps. The keys are quiet now. The city beyond your window seems farther away with every breath, its wheels and footsteps dissolving into a soft, indistinct murmur. You have travelled through one ordinary Victorian day, and perhaps that is the best way to understand this vanished life. Not through palaces or grand ceremonies, through soap, through linen, through tired hands, through the sound of a cupboard locking. The woman you have inhabited tonight leaves the little spectacle behind her. Tomorrow she will rise before the comfortable people upstairs. She will dress carefully, fasten her keys at her waist, and begin restoring order before anyone notices disorder existed. But you do not have to follow her into tomorrow. You can remain here in the quiet. The grate holds only a faint red glow. The corridors are dark. Every polished spoon is safely where it belongs. Every folded sheet waits patiently behind its door. Even the bells seem impossibly far away. So let London fade. Let 1855 soften into shadow. Let the smoke above the rooftops drift beyond sight. The servants' staircase is empty now. The kitchen tables have been wiped clean. The last cup has been put away. Nothing needs checking again. And if your own day has been long, you may leave its little worries outside this room as well. There is nowhere else you need to go tonight. No inventory waiting, no visitor arriving early, no mistress requesting brighter curtains, only darkness, warmth, and the slow rhythm of rest. Breathe gently, allow your hands to loosen, let your shoulders sink, and imagine those housekeeper's keys resting peacefully on the wooden table, catching one final trace of moonlight before the room becomes completely still. Tomorrow belongs to tomorrow. Tonight belongs to sleep, sweet dreams.